Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 211, as is more commonly known. My name is NBZ, and I'm here on the first day of my holiday for the end of the year, which is very exciting.
So
I've
jealous.
got time off. I've got a million video games to play. I'm also considering, the Epic sales on. There's a $10 coupon or £10 coupon.
And the start of 2022 is stacked.
I could get Guardians of the Galaxy for £22.50 here, it's not like I have too many games to play already, but that's where my brain is right now. I'm just like, well, I'll just buy more video games. I just bought a VR headset. I have this fucking drum kit now. It's just it's a whole thing going on. We'll get into it, of course, but Bally also joins me, who, unfortunately, not yet on holiday, but will be soon, I'm sure.
I'm not yet on holiday, although still playing a lot of video games, but yeah, not on holiday yet, and just trying to fit in as much as possible before leaving my Xbox Series X for a good long 10 days or so.
You need to get into that cloud gaming, son, get on your phone, get a backbone controller,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm too lazy to bother trying to set that up, and obviously I'm not subscribed to Ultimate either, but
no.
Yeah. Maybe one day.
One day, maybe. We've seen Bally go through many changes on this show, so one day he will love a mobile game and come on here and talk about the free-to-play and how he loves it so much.
Hey, look, I've got 3 consoles of the current gen. You wouldn't have said that back in 2017, right?
Stranger things have happened. Bally might get into a niche visual novel from Japan that is Japan only, and do a fan translation on a computer one day. Who knows? Wilder things have happened.
I feel you could have said that about first-person shooters before, and here I am loving Halo Infinite campaign, FPS.
Who are you anymore, Bally? Who even are you? I've never met you before. Hello, we're here to talk about video games. It's the end of the year, it's good times, and this will be our last kind of Game of the Year episode, because we've had a couple, and it's been fun so far, but this is the one where the meat comes down to it. It's the big important one, and obviously we'll be chatting a bunch about that, but also we will be doing stuff next year, and we just wanted to give a shout out at the start of the show to say that our first episode of the year is always our prediction special, which means that we predict whatever Nintendo will do, some wild nonsense in the next year. Usually we like to get some listener emails and thoughts on that as well.
And cover what we thought back at the start of 2021 Nintendo was going to do in 2021, which will be fun to revisit.
Yeah, we'll go over our old predictions that will undoubtedly be completely wrong. But yes, we would love to hear from you fine folks out there. So if you have an email or a thought you want to send to us about predictions for 2022 for Nintendo, you can send them to our email address, which Bally will tell you right now.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Fan-dabby dozy. Cool. Well, Bally, we have a bunch of stuff to talk about on the show today. Do you want to break it down for us and what we're actually going to be doing?
For the first segment, we're going to be talking about the little Nintendo Indies presentation that they had just a few days ago, actually. So we'll get into that, as well as the games that we have been playing for the first segment. And then for the second segment, it's the big one. It is the top 10 Nintendo games of 2021. We are going to make a combined list of all the games that we've been playing on Nintendo systems in the year 2021. We've got 19 games to turn into a top 10 list that we will get to in the second segment. We'll also talk through some of your lists that you sent us with your top Nintendo games of 2021.
Of course, yeah. Look forward to that, and we'll, of course, be debating and discussing and figuring out an ordered list, so that'll be a great time. But let's kick things off, chatting about some stuff we've been playing, but also that Indie Direct that happened. So yeah, this was obviously Nintendo usually come out of nowhere and anyway, tomorrow is an Indie World. There's a bit of hint from Emily Rogers actually on this one, bit of a heads up. Yeah, they usually do these pretty frequently. I feel like they do at least 3 or 4 of these per year at minimum.
Is there normally one in December? It feels very late. Has that happened before?
I think it's happened before. There's definitely been directs in December before. There was one I remember that happened on the 28th of December at one point one year, which is a weird time to do it. But yeah, they have obviously kept these as a frequent thing. I really like them. Generally I think that they are a really cool way of delivering stuff that no one has ever heard of to an audience, and I think Nintendo likes to approach them that way for the most part, which I think for a lot of people are like, well, this was underwhelming because I didn't get Hollow Knight and I didn't get the sequel to my favorite indie game from years ago, right? Because I think a lot of people, when it comes to announcements, it's about known quantities for most people. They're like, well, I'm waiting for X thing that I know about. I really admire Nintendo's approach with these in terms of, well, you've probably not heard of any of these, and we're going to just try and make you interested in them. And I think that's...
But here's a game that's a similar style to that game you're
Yes.
excited about, that we think you'll also like or love.
Exactly, yeah, for sure. And they've done that a bunch in the past. And I think generally the internet, when it comes to that, usually are like, well, that was a bad one because of that. And I don't really like that approach generally. I tend to think
Is that what the internet said about this one?
I think the internet's kind of lukewarm on this one, probably, and I think that's...
I think they've said that about every single one that's not had Silk Song in it. And
exactly,
as you've
yes.
said, we kind of think that's going to be saved for a larger presentation, not an indies.
Either it will be saved for a main Nintendo Direct, or it will just get its own dedicated Direct. At this point, I think it's big enough for Nintendo to do that, right?
Do you think they get timed exclusivity on Silk Song?
Interesting question. I think probably. I think that's probably the way they'll handle it. Nintendo will probably want to give them a bunch of money for that, and they might say yes to it. And it'll be PC and Switch, I imagine. Because, frankly, PlayStation and Xbox, like, sure, indie games sell on there, but it's unless you're on Game Pass, Xbox is kind of a non-starter, and PlayStation also have not had the best reputation as of recent.
That's the only alternative I could see, is if Microsoft are like, you know what, we need to throw a ton of money at this, and they get Game Pass.
Yeah, man, if they get that on Game Pass, that's insanity. But yeah, I don't think, because, look, Team Cherry know that they will instantly sell millions of copies of this game as soon as it goes on sale, so no reason for them to do that. But anyway, Silk Song aside, I thought this was pretty cool overall. There were some things that I'd known about in the past that got a bit of a reintroduction, some stuff which I'd known about which obviously have not been announced for Switch yet, and some cool things that people are big fans of. So, Bally, is there something that kind of stood out to you the most? What is the thing you're taking away from this indie presentation?
A few highlights from me. I was unaware of Sea of Stars. That's the first time I saw it. I thought it looked fantastic, and just like everything we love about those Super Nintendo style JRPGs, but given that modern cut of paint, and it's like the same team behind the Messenger. And apparently
Sabotage
there's a prequel
Studios
to that game, right? And I think that's looking fantastic. So I think that's coming out next year, which
should be end of next year. Yeah, they've been working on it for a while. I've known about this game, I think, since it was announced. They ran a Kickstarter for it, and I think it did incredibly well. Rightly so, because the game looks absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, they had a fantastic soundtrack for The Messenger, which also is being carried through here with Mitsuda, who is like one of the most famous composers in terms of Japanese music. Obviously did Xenoblade and did Chrono Trigger, so like very, very high bar there in terms of music quality, but also Messenger had great pixel art and had an interesting twist in it, and I think Sea of Stars is just stepping that up to another level. Like, it really feels like this beautifully like painterly world in terms of how bright and colorful it is, but the pixel art is so detailed and well done, and feels like Chrono Trigger in the sense that the battles feel like they're happening in real time, and you kind of like move into the spaces as it's happening. And I'm really excited for it. I hope it's good. I think The Messenger was excellent. It has problems, and I think part of that was the genre switch that happens in that game that I don't think was well handled. But I think that they can make an excellent game, and I think that this will be very good, hopefully. So, you looking forward to it.
It's tough to deliver good mechanics and a good story, and if it can do both of those, it's really high flying. But I'd be surprised if it can fully deliver on both of those. But we'll see.
Yeah, it seems very, very promising, and of course Nintendo would want to put it up front and center, which they did, which was great. For me, a very good one was, and they didn't really highlight this, and I think this comes back to Nintendo's idea of like they want new stuff as opposed to stuff that's been other places. But I think Chicory is kind of the headline of this in terms of a thing that's coming out on Switch soon, which is already out. It came out on Switch, but it was just part of their montage reel of like, oh, here's a montage of just a bunch of games that are coming that we don't want to like put a ton of focus on. I think it really speaks to Nintendo's like, hey, like, cool, it's on our system, but we want stuff that is more like exclusive or like new or first or day one,
Kind of shows their swagger, like they've got so much going on when it comes to indies that even one of the biggest indie games of the year is just part of a reel when it comes to Switch. It kind of shows that they've got a lot more that they want to demonstrate and they think they can, I guess, make more money from.
Yeah, of course. And I think Chicory will do fantastically on Switch just because of the brand recognition already. Like, people know what it is and people are excited about it. And it feels like, the whole painting mechanic and the touchscreen on Switch makes a lot of sense, right? It feels like a natural fit for it. But also, it was really nice to see the developer, Greg Lobanov, I think he is, talking on Twitter about how he paid real special attention to HD Rumble, which is something I think we don't see as much anymore on Switch games.
No.
A couple of games this year that did it really well. I think East Westward was a great example for me of a game that did it really well. And Metroid Dread also had some really nice HD Rumble implementation. So it still happens, but I don't think it's as prominent as it was obviously when the system came out. So it's nice to see that he's kind of leaning into that, and it seems like, from what I've heard, a good version of the game. And so that's probably the version I will end up playing at some point next year, because obviously you were very positive on it and really enjoyed it. So looking forward to that. Any others here, Bally, that stood out to you?
It's good to see Ollie Ollie World get a February 8th release date. I thought there was a slim chance of a shadow drop.
Yeah, not great for your fantasy league, unfortunately, because you wanted to get some points for the end of this year. But
there was a slim chance, but it didn't happen. And I still think that game's looking really good. And, if it needs more time to cook, then that's what it needs, and it doesn't really matter whether I have it in my fantasy critic or not.
Yeah, of course. You can pick it next year, like I'm sure someone will take that next year, because it seems like it's doing some cool stuff, and I'm interested.
Really cool.
I'm a little maybe skeptical of what the Switch version will run like. It seemed like resolution-wise it had taken a bit of a knock when we were showing they were showing footage of it. But if it runs well and runs smoothly, I think Switch is definitely the place I would prefer to play that game. I played the first two on PC, and I think I would like them handheld, honestly, because they're the type of jump in and kind of just do a level type of experience that I prefer in a handheld kind of format.
If they have to sacrifice a bit of resolution to make that thing just run really nicely, I could probably cope. I think
I think so. I think so. Another one that I thought was kind of cool was Endling, Extinction is Forever. So this is the Fox game. This is kind of a side-scrolling Fox game. This seems narrative-driven, very sad. Like, you got the little baby foxes and stuff like that. And the narrators, the Nintendo narrators were like, well, maybe they won't all make it. And I was like, Jesus, man, this is pretty dark for a Nintendo presentation.
What happened to all the positive energy you had going into this show? And it's just, I feel like the commentators, they just have this unbelievable amount of positive energy. And you get this with Nintendo E3 as well, when they're presenting with the directs, the Treehouse, I should say. And it's just this, like, bubblegum energy that I feel just got completely sucked out for this game, when they're talking about, like, these cubs potentially dying in this, like, in this barren world. It was very, very sad. Sure. But that game could be really cool. Give me big Inside vibes or something. Could be cool.
Yeah, definitely has that stuff going on. What I will say is, like, as someone who looks at a lot of games on Steam as part of my job, there are so many fucking Fox games. Holy shit.
Really?
Dude. There are so many. And I kind of get a bit blind to them at this point, because I've seen so many. So I'm like, have I seen this before? I don't know. Frankly, I've seen so many fucking Fox games. But this one looks pretty cool. So, at least it stands out somewhat. Chucklefish publishing a new game called Locomotive. What do you think of this one, Bally?
Yeah, I've not really dabbled with many, if any, genuine point and click adventures, and it's got that the trademark Chucklefish published games pixel art style. I like the play on words that took me a while to notice, was like locomotive, motive for murder kind of thing. I love that idea. Yeah, I think that was really cool. And it's one of those things where I'm not really that into point and clicks, but knowing that it's published by Chucklefish, maybe that's the one I should give a go, because it's like, I trust them. I think they publish fantastic games, and I think it looks cool. I think it's implied the whole thing's taking place on the train, which is kind of nice. It's a nice setting. So if that's a kind of shortish experience but delivers a decent story, I could be keen.
Yeah, I know that Caroline kind of grew up with some classic point and click adventure games. And
we've got Thimbleweed Park sitting on my Switch that we've been meaning to play for years now, and we've just never got around to it. So
totally. So it could be a fun co-op experience to play that, I imagine. Yeah, that sounds cool. Aside from that, there wasn't a huge amount that I was super interested in until the final announcement happened, which is Omori, a game that has a massive and rabid fandom. It came out at the end of last year, December last year, on Steam, and it's one of those games that has just blown up in that space, and I don't think, like, in our spaces many people know about it, but it is absolutely enormous in terms of its fan base and the memes and the kind of community around it. Like, it is Undertale-esque in the people who love it, and it's really cool to see it coming to Switch. I know you weren't a big fan of this as a One More Thing announcement, but I think there's a big audience out there for it, and it's really interesting because you look at it and it's like, okay, this kind of looks like an MS Paint kind of like...
It was originally made in RPG Maker, I was reading.
Yes, it's an RPG Maker game.
It was kickstarted initially, and the writer, the developer, I believe he was going to potentially make this into like a graphic novel or something about his own life experience, and decided, actually, I'd rather make this a game. And yeah, you're right. I hadn't heard of it, and it's obviously got a big following. I'm interested if it like takes off with a Switch audience, and you know, a game like the Eastward, for example, that we thought was very Earthbound inspired, didn't really make as many media waves as I'd hoped this year. So maybe this game is a game that seems to have already done that, but it'd be interesting to see if it can do that to a Nintendo audience.
Yeah, I actually think it's one of those weird things where, like, the circles that we listen to and the kind of places we're in, not many people are talking about stuff like Omori or Eastward, but when it comes down to, like, actual sales numbers and how well those games do, like, Eastward is killing it on Steam. It was also number one on the eShop charts for ages. Omori will likely do the same thing, so, like, sure, it may not be something that we're always hearing about, but these games are doing very well, right? Like, they have a big audience, and those audiences really, really love these games. So, yeah, I'm really interested in checking it out. You know, I've got it on my Steam. I've had it on my Steam wishlist now for a while, because I was curious about it. And, you know, maybe it's a smart thing to wait until spring next year, when it comes to Switch, when I'm sure a lot of people will be playing it, and I'm sure that's the kind of time when our circles will actually talk about it, because it's like, oh, this thing has come to Switch, and a lot of people have momentum behind it. So, interested to hear the conversations when that game comes out. But yeah, I think generally a really cool presentation, some fun things going on there. There are a couple of games like this Alicia game that they showed off, where every time I see a game like that on Switch, my heart like goes, I don't know if this is the right call, because it's a 3D thing. The frame rate looks bad. Like this, the same with Grime, which is a side-scrolling Metroidvania that also came out this year on Steam and has done really well as one of those that I don't particularly like the look of, but I look at that version on Switch and I'm like, man, this is fucking ugly. Like, it really looks bad when you try and do side-scrolling, like, polygonal stuff in 2D that is ported from a higher-end system to Switch. It just doesn't look very good. And, you know, sometimes I question, like, why are Nintendo spotlighting some of these games? There was another Dungeon Munchies, which I thought was an interesting idea, but, like, the animation on the character seemed weird. I don't know.
The games ran horrendously badly. I can't remember the name of the game later.
Yeah, there are a couple in the montage as well, like that, right? Like, it's questionable, but I'm sure, like, Nintendo, from their perspective, it's much more important to be like, okay, we think this game is good, and we think obviously it'll be better by the time it launches, but also it's not anywhere else. Like, this is a new thing just for us, and yeah, that's.
It's like a game like Boomerang X that was only on Switch and PC, right? They kind of, there's a lot of games that probably need the heft of PC, but they're still putting out on Switch regardless. And
yeah, they're releasing on Switch because it's the most viable platform for independent games at the moment, right? Like, if you want to sell, you know, volume, then you have to go there, even if fundamentally the version is just not as good as you want it to be. So yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, that was great. Some cool stuff going on. Let's transition into the video games, what we've been playing. Bally, you picked up a real short little game that people were chatting about earlier this year that I played, Toree 3D. Tell us about it.
It's also got a sequel that neither of us have tried. Maybe give a go. Toree 3D, it's a very short, 45 minutes, an hour long 3D platformer. It's sort of like 8 designated levels and a kind of final boss style level. And yeah, it's very traditional platforming from it's harping on the kind of PS2, GameCube kind of era in terms of like its graphical style. And, you know, it's pretty good I think it costs like 89p, 99p a pound or something. Like, it's super cheap. And for that value, I think it's pretty great. Like, it's not anything special, but the platforming feels good enough. And, you know, there's things to collect. I collected all the stars in the game in order to like unlock one of the secret characters, and then played a few more levels with that secret character. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. I've seen credits. I'm good with this game. But yeah, it made me realize, like, the art of just 2D platforming, I feel, is in so many games these days. When you think about like Metroidvanias, or even a game like Night in the Woods or Spiritfarer, like 2D platforming is just so synonymous with like video gaming generally, in a way that I'd argue 3D platforming isn't. And what I mean by that is, like, Toree 3D, just 3D platforming around, it's like, this feels good, and I'm not sick of this feeling because I'm not doing it in every single other game like I feel like I am to a similar degree with 2D platforming. Like, right. I think that there's enough 3D games out there that don't have platforming. That means when games do have platforming and focus on it, I still get a real kick out of it, even if this year did include Psychonauts 2, Ratchet and Clank, It Takes Two, which all have loads of 3D platforming elements. I don't think that's the norm in the industry at the moment. So I still think a game like a Toree 3D can just fill a little niche that is just like, you know what, I feel like just doing a bit of 3D platforming in a way that 2D platforming feels like it's in every single game these days.
Yeah, it feels like an element that's like very lightly touched upon in a lot of different games. I just started playing the Gunk, and that's kind of a game. I think Kena Bridge of Spirits is also similar, where like there's jumping and there's double jumping, right? And you can do that, but it's not ever really hard, and it's usually like a means to an end of like, oh, I solved this puzzle, now I have to jump across it, right? It's there's not really a challenge in it. It's just like, oh, it feels nice to jump in a game, so we have it, but it's not the focus. It's not like the purpose of what you're doing, but it's always kind of present. And yeah, there's certain adventure games and like action games where they just don't have it, right? And I don't know. I always like a game with a jump, a 3D game with a jump. I even like Xenoblade, right? Xenoblade's a game that has no platforming in it at all, but for some reason you can jump, and I like that that's in there just because I like the ability to jump in games. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but yeah.
But it's nothing special. It does what it says on the tin, and
it's also just very cheap. It's like stupidly cheap, right?
It's just so cheap that like even trying to give it a full review, as it were, feels not quite appropriate. It's just like, if you just want a little bit of platforming, it's like £1. Go for it. This is fun. Go do it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really have much more to say than that.
Yeah.
It's nothing special.
Yeah, there's nothing to say about it in terms of like, oh, the level design in this is so like, it's totally fine. Like, it's good. There are some neat twists on there. There's like a level where you're going across like trucks and stuff, and some of it I found a little tricky in terms of like getting the jump to work. Like, I don't know, it just felt not as smooth as you might want, but again, like, it's a really small game made by one guy, and
you are doing 100% of the camera work is one thing I will say. Where I feel like a lot of games these days, you might have to adjust the camera here and there, but you're not feeling like you're doing 100% of the work, and you are with this. I also think the music is actually much better than it deserves to be. It's pretty catchy tunes in there. So yeah, check it out, Toree 3D.
Yeah, it also has a weird like horror twist at some point that I didn't understand at all, and I was like,
yeah, that really shocked me.
Yeah,
I was like, what?
Super bizarre. But yeah,
that was weird.
Strange.
Yeah, look out for that.
Awesome. Well, okay, so I have a game to talk about that I didn't necessarily expect I would be talking about in this way or this soon. So obviously I mentioned like last time that I had bought a bunch of games in the Switch sale for the future and like talking about on the show and stuff. And one of them was Taiko no Tatsujin, which is a arcade drumming game from Japan. I believe you played when you went to an arcade there.
Yes, I played it on our day trip to Hiroshima. We stopped by and just had a little game, a little song each, me and Caroline.
And I've looked up some videos online, and it looks like they're like big drums with like full drumsticks and stuff that you do.
Yeah, they give you the really big wooden drums, like massive, but yeah.
And the drums are like big barrels, basically, right? Yes. Like, they're just huge. I watched a video of some kid who was like a demon at it and just going ham, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is ridiculous. I'm sure there are a bunch of kids in Japan who just rock up to arcades, and, you know, foreigners are there just like in the arcade, and then they just like start a song, and they're just like
I'm interested like how popular that kind of traditional style of drumming is in Japan, if like many kids do it or not, or whether it's quite a niche audience. I don't know. I'd be interested.
Yeah. So anyway, I picked that up just being like, well, the drums are really expensive and I probably won't be able to get them and stuff like that. But I just wanted to try the game because it was £10, right? It was 50 quid down to 10. So I was like, this is a series I've been interested in for a while. I've heard people talk good things about it. Let's check it out. Into rhythm games, all that stuff. And then, obviously I was chatting about this with some people at work and was like, oh yeah, this, that's what I got recently in the sale, and these drums look cool, but they're expensive, and I don't know if I want to get them. And my work got together and bought me a birthday present. It's my 30th birthday, just happened. Happy birthday to me. Wow, I'm so old. I was like, okay, that's cool. I just sent it in the post, and I was like, all right, I'll wait until my birthday to open it. Open this present, and it turns out they bought me the fucking drum set for Taiko no Tatsujin, and I'm like, holy shit, that's like the nicest present that I've ever gotten. Wow. Maybe. I was shocked. Honestly, I was pretty stunned. So that was incredibly nice. And so yeah, I have the drum for Taiko no Tatsujin now, and I was like, well, I'm playing this straight away because I've got to give these a go. And man, this game, I don't know that I would say it's not worth it to play it without the drums, but holy shit, it is so much better with the drums. My God,
is it Bluetooth, the drum kit?
No, it's USB. So
USB,
you USB into the Switch dock, and you get these 2 mini drumsticks, and the drum itself is relatively large, but like it sits nicely for me for my setup in terms of I have a desk in front of me, so when I play games, obviously I've got my monitors and stuff. It'd be harder, I think, to do in a living room setup where you have a TV and it's harder to like place it on a table or something in front of you if you're on a sofa, for example. But it works really nicely for me because it's like right in front of the monitor and everything.
Is it quite flat? Are you hitting the drum? Is it flat when you're hitting it?
So it's angle. Basically, it comes with a stand, and you attach the stand to it, and so it's sitting there at kind of an angle to you, like a 45-degree angle, looking up at you. And so the way that this game works is that when you hit the drums, hitting the middle parts of the drum, like the center of the drum, is red notes, and hitting the rim of the drum is blue notes, right? So they're 2 different notes, red and blue, and you have to switch between the rim and the main drum. And sometimes when I'm hitting the main drum, because I'm not coming at it at enough of an angle, my drumstick maybe hits the controls at the bottom. The controls at the bottom actually have a full switch interface, so it has like A, B, X, Y, the D-pad, home button, screenshot button, all just like at the bottom of the drum set. So you can use it to navigate menus. If you really wanted to, you could just play any video game with this drum kit, which I think would be ridiculous.
Donkey Konga?
Exactly, yeah, no, but you could go into any game. You could play Tropical Freeze if you wanted to with this and see how that went. I probably wouldn't recommend it. It would probably be quite bad, but it's possible to do so. And it's so I was looking this up online as well, and it seems like a lot of people have problems in terms of the sensitivity with the drum kit. Seems like a widespread issue that either it's to do with the way that they implemented the sensors on the rim or the main thing. They're just not. You kind of have to hit the drum quite hard for them to register, basically. And so at a high level of play, a lot of people are like, well, I just have to mod this thing, because if you just do like light taps, which you're going to inevitably have to do when you get to the expert levels, they just won't register, right? And I have already had issues of registering like the rim hits at the top. It's a little tricky. I think the other thing people have said that I've read online is like the more you use it, the more you kind of beat it up, it gets better at registering that stuff because it kind of softens up almost, right? So I guess I just need to hit it really hard for a bunch of time before it will like register stuff a bit better. But there are ways that people have modded them, basically taking it apart and putting stuff inside, which, you know, I'm not the type of person who usually does that, but I'm loving this game so much that I've been thinking about it because it's so cool. Like there's a real fundamental fun kind of rhythm element to it, and because you feel and you like, it's not like Guitar Hero where you're just pressing the buttons and you're hearing it in game. The thing that's cool about drums is like hitting a thing inherently makes a noise, right? And so you are hearing the beat in your headphones, but also like just hitting the drum, you're going to hear it, right? And so there is that feedback, that like visceral feedback of just smashing something that is very satisfying. And I tried drums back in the day on Guitar Hero, and I was never any good at them, and I think part of the reason why is because of the foot pedal. Foot pedal is like my biggest enemy when it comes to this stuff, because it's tapping your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, right? It is 2 different things your body has to do and understand, and it's really hard to get it right. And the thing I like about this game is that it doesn't have that type of foot pedal stuff, but it's still really complicated because there are certain notes where you have to hit it with both sticks at the same time. So there'll be like big notes where you have to do double hit, and you can do that for the rim and for the big ones. But then they come in like different trills and stuff, like the speed of the song and all that stuff is really well balanced, I found. And there is just so much fucking music in this game. It is unreal. There's also a bunch of free DLC, which I went to the eShop and I was like, oh, let's just get all the free DLC. And I was scrolling for like 10 minutes through like tons of paid DLC. I saw there was, oh god, I can't remember what game it was. There was like a Nintendo game. There was Star Wars. There was a Star Wars theme that you could buy for 79p, right? Like all this DLC, like 79p each, or like £1, whatever. You could buy a ton of different songs for the game.
And there's loads of stuff that's not just Japanese songs.
Yeah, so interesting. My sister was here and she had a go on it, and I was like, okay, let's try and find a thing she knows. I was like, yes, that song from Moana is in here, but the Japanese version of the song from Moana is in there, and it's clearly a cover. I don't think it's like the actual thing because licensing and stuff like that, but it does feel like Donkey Konga in that way.
You mean the main singer didn't learn Japanese?
Yeah, well, yes, of course. In Donkey Konga, it felt very similar because the songs there weren't actual the real ones, they were just like covers.
I think Guitar Hero is also the same. They get like covers.
So Guitar Hero was that before 3, like prior to 3, 1 and 2.
Yeah, you're right.
Was like that.
It changed at a point.
Onwards, they started paying for licenses, which made it better, I thought. But in this case, I think it works, especially because like it's the Japanese version of Moana, so I don't even know if it's an official one or not. I'm just like, the song is good and I like it. They also have some Nintendo stuff in there, so there is a Splatoon remix, there is Kirby stuff. There is for anime stuff, they've got an anime section of like anime music as well. So anime intros, as you know, Bal, it can be bangers, and there are a lot of anime music bangers in here. A lot of bangers. Neon Genesis Evangelion is like one of the most famous anime of all time, and obviously it came to Netflix recently, a couple of years ago. I still have to. Waypoint did a whole thing where they did a whole series talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion, and it's one of those things where I would like to go back and watch all that stuff and listen to them talk about it because it seems very interesting. But one thing that is very famous about that show is its opening theme, Cruel Angel's Thesis, which you might have heard before and just not known you've heard it, but it's a fucking banger of a song, and that is in there. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, I'm just playing Cruel Angel's Thesis for the rest of time because it's just such a good opener.
How much have you spent on all these different songs, or are they all
I spent nothing. So what I'm talking about is like all the amount of songs in the base game is like, it must be 200 or so.
Base game, right?
Yeah, there must be like 200 or so just in the base game. There are so many goddamn tracks, and I am basically going through every single one of them on normal. So I'm just like, press down, do the next one, press down, and you just go through this giant list of songs. There's not really a campaign to speak of. You just go and play the songs essentially. And so my campaign playthrough, I guess, of it is just doing every song on normal, and then learning it a bit better to do the hard versions and kind of building myself up. But yeah, that's kind of my goal right now is to do all of the songs and get through them. But yeah, I've played this a lot, probably at least 4 or 5 hours at this point. Nice. And I don't think I've done every song yet. So like, and the thing is, the songs are not the full versions either. They're usually shorter versions of them, which I actually appreciate. This is the thing that I recently bought the Lady Gaga pack for Beat Saber as well. And the thing I noticed about that is that I was getting way more tired because those songs are like sometimes 4 or 5 minutes long, and you don't realize it, but most of the songs in Beat Saber are like 2 minutes. And that's a good length of a song for Beat Saber, because otherwise you're just like fucking knackered by the end of it. It's just like, I can't imagine doing Bohemian Rhapsody in Beat Saber, right? Like that seems like it would be a nightmare because you're just there for 7 minutes straight doing all this stuff. Yeah. Songs just feel longer when you're playing them in Beat Saber, basically. You're just like trapped in this world of just like, oh, my hands are moving, and especially now I'm doing expert on most songs on Beat Saber, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, help me. Everything is falling to pieces, but yeah, I'm able to do it, which is satisfying. But I think Taiko no Tatsujin has a similar approach, which is, look, you're going to get tired hitting this drum a bunch, so we're going to make the songs short. Like, they're usually about 2 minutes long, which is a good choice, I think, and it works for what the game is going for. And obviously, I think you can actually string stuff together if you want to do, like, multiple songs in a row and that type of thing. But, yeah, the difficulty is well balanced for normal. It's got a good build to it. I think the hardest thing for me is just, like, sometimes the sensitivity just isn't there. And I'm sure it'll get there as I play the game more and just hit it more. But like, I think the right-hand side of the rim of the drum is just not consistent. So I have to really hit it at the right angle. I was looking up online of like the best angles to hit these things from and stuff like that. But it's especially like some of the songs, or a lot of the songs actually have drum fills where it's like, just bash it, just go, you know, and whenever that happens, I'm just like in the zone, just like feels so good. So absolutely loving this so far, and I think I probably will take a look through all the DLC, see if there are any packs, because what I was looking through was like individual songs on their own. Like, sure, I want to play the Star Wars theme, but I want to play 79p for the Star Wars theme. Like, I'd prefer to get a pack of like, I don't know, a bunch of songs for 10 quid or something, right? So I'm going to have a look and see if they have those available. But yeah, a lot of Nintendo references in there in terms of the music, but also anime songs. There's also classical music songs in there. They basically split it up into different categories. There's like at least like 6 or 7 categories of these, like video game music and anime music and TV shows and original music written for the game, and most of it is Japanese. I think I would say actually all of it is in Japanese. I don't think there's any English songs in here, aside from like Moana, which is, you know, just translated into Japanese. So yeah, a wild thing that I did not expect to be playing and did not expect to have these drums, but now I do.
Very cool.
And frankly, it's one of my favorite things I've played all year. I am so into it. I'm having a blast, and I can see myself playing this for a long time to come, and like really getting into it. So yeah, absolutely love Taiko no Tatsujin.
At the same time as Beat Saber's come along. You got these two new rhythm
That's what I'm
games,
saying. Like,
yeah.
I'm in rhythm game paradise right now. Like, Rhythm Heaven, obviously, just kicking it off this year. But now that's all I'm playing is rhythm games. Playing so much Beat Saber, so much of this, and yeah,
Sounds like it's got the track list where Beat Saber falls a bit short. It doesn't.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Like, and I'm like partial to Japanese music. You know, I do like anime intros and stuff like that. I like a good kind of ballad, and
we need more anime intro Beat Saber is what you're saying.
I think so. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Cruel Angel's Thesis. Come on, guys. I'm sure that's already modded on Beat Saber. I could, if I bought Beat Saber on Steam and did the mods for that, I could play that.
I can tell you'll do that at some point.
I will. I 100% will. Yeah. The next Steam sale when Beat Saber is £3, I'm buying it and doing all the mod stuff on PC because that sounds like so much fun to do, because you can have infinite songs and you can play Undertale stuff on it. Oh god, I'm looking forward to doing that at some point. But yeah, Taiko no Tatsujin. I have tried it without the drums, I will say, because I played it handheld in the office, like during work one day, during a break, and it works. I don't think it's as satisfying, right? Like, and so this is my warning: is like, if you don't want to commit to the drum set, you can have a good time with it. I think it's still a fun rhythm game, but like the real satisfaction comes from the beat of hitting the drums, and you don't get that, unfortunately, with with just the basic button controls.
There's no way of getting my Donkey Konga bongos hooked up to it.
I mean, probably you could because of the GameCube adapter to it and through the USB. I wonder if that's possible. I think someone must have done that, probably. So maybe there's a route to do it through that. Who knows, man? I definitely think it's possible.
It's the same inputs, like it's two drums and a clap.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
right.
It could work potentially. Yeah, definitely worth looking into, I would imagine. But yeah, it's definitely a cool game that people should check out if they can in the best way possible, which is to buy the drums, which I know the drums are not available in North America. I believe you can only buy them in Europe and Japan. So yeah, kind of
weird.
Out of luck. You had to import in that case, which is a bit of a bummer. But yeah, awesome stuff. Cool. Bally, you've been playing, you finished up a game that we started talking about last week, Unsighted, just in time for our Game of the Year, because I think I was telling you, like, this is one that I'm probably going to be backing quite a bit, so... I'm
glad you made me play this, because, I'm definitely keen to talk about this in the next segment, but I was very impressed by Unsighted overall. Like, it's just... I think if me and you, MBZ... made a development studio called TNL and we had the budget, the skills, the imagination, I genuinely think this is the sort of game we'd actually probably try and put together.
Most likely, yeah.
Because it's got the bosses, it's got the systems, it's got the exploration, it's got the abilities, it's got a decent story. Maybe the sci-fi thing is not something we'd naturally go for.
Yeah, we'd lean more into fantasy, I imagine.
Definitely, but other than that, like it all just really works and comes together in just the most fantastic way. I think that the bosses and the combat just kept improving as the game went on, and I never got sick of that kind of like counter mechanic. It was so satisfying, and I did stick with the sword for basically the whole game, and then obviously you get like another weapon at the very end. But I was very satisfied. I think the difficulty is perfect, honestly, from my personal skill level. Like, I really, really loved it, where there was a couple of bosses where I didn't actually die once, but it was because I had prepared myself with like cogs, and I actually think the cog system is fantastic, where there's like NPCs in the game that tell you very early on, like, make sure you use your cogs, and I think it's just that little nudge that I need. Maybe I wish I'd had that nudge in a lot of JRPGs I've played, where you just don't end up using your potions and
revives. Yes, that's exactly the comparison point. Is like, it is this limited reason. I think actually one of the smart things the game does is it limits you to only having 4. So you basically like feel like, okay, well, I only have 4 of these.
It's impossible to stockpile.
Yeah, you can't stockpile a bunch of them, and so it means, and they're so easy to make, especially the attack and defense ones, that you will always be like, okay, it doesn't matter if I use an attack and defense one, because I've got tons of materials, and if I need another one, I can just make it, right? So it fixes that problem that I think a lot of games have, where players just don't use the resources given to them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I got like cogs later on in the game that boosted my syringes when they were low and this sort of thing. And there is a real skill, a bit like a Hollow Knight, in actually using your syringes and timing when you're recovering. Because if you, like, Hollow Knight is one of those games where these boss fights are so quick and fast, and there's actually an upgrade in Hollow Knight one of the badges that increases the speed at which you can heal yourself.
Right.
And
yeah.
Unsighted is the same. There's like an ability that makes you putting in your syringes faster, and stuff like that in intense boss fights is super important. And where you might
especially with the stamina management as well, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're running around and like trying to not lose your stamina, so then you'll just kind of be out of action for a couple of seconds, which can be devastating.
Yeah, and it really does feel like there is a level of skill in understanding your playstyle and understanding, right, what badges work best for me, because I'd often maybe switch up badges before boss fight, for example, and I think stopping and thinking, actually, how will this benefit me? Do I need more attack? Do I need more defense? Shall I get a cog that boosts the one I'm not boosting through my badges, through my chips, I should say? I love all that stuff. I think it's just, initially it was quite overwhelming, the amount of mechanics, but a bit like Hollow Knight, like it worked. It really worked for me, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I think the diversity of the biomes is actually a massive strength of this game as well.
Right.
And it's not just, sure, there's a water area and there's like a lava area, but it's more than that. There's like an area above the world that's like based around a university, and it's just kind of like ivy and green and lush. And I thought it would, pixel art wise, it's maybe not my favorite style of pixel art, but it really worked for what the game is. And you know, I would say if there's one thing about this game, I wish the developers had either leaned in massively to the Unsighted mechanic and made it compulsory, or potentially even just taken out the game entirely. And maybe that's tough when the game is called Unsighted.
Yeah,
but I'm always a big believer. I'm not a big fan of multiple endings. I'm not a huge fan of multiple ways to play a game. I'm glad they're in games because I think it's important for, you know, accessibility in games. But I personally like playing games the way that the developer has said, right, we've made this game in this vision, and I want to experience that vision, whether it's to do with difficulty or plot mechanic or something that is like the Unsighted system. So I think they've, judging by how quickly they kind of did an update that meant you could turn that off, they've probably learned that. And I think if they make a sequel, hopefully they will, they could learn a lot from that and do something pretty special, because this game has so much going for it, and again, hasn't been talked about much.
I do think that narrative stuff, for me, it just wasn't compelling enough for me to care about the Unsighted mechanic, right? Because
for how compelling it was more worrying than it was compelling.
Exactly.
Like if they could just have flipped that, where it was a minor worry but very compelling, I would have turned it on in a heartbeat. And the game didn't give me enough early on to make that decision, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's because the characters themselves, when you go and talk to them, it's like they don't really have a huge amount to say, and they only change what they say, I guess, when you give them the meteor dust, which is the thing that increases the amount of time they can live for, and therefore, you know, you get an extra heart with them. It's like the heart meter type of deal. And I got a bit of that with my Navi kind of fairy companion, and obviously they started helping me, but like story-wise, in terms of those characters, I never felt a compelling reason to actually care about any of them, because I don't think they were built out enough as characters, if you know what I mean. Just like the village NPCs, you know, I think if they had compelling stories and like side quests that you went on for them, that also would have impacted like how much time you, like if you take time out of the quest to do side stuff instead, that will obviously have an impact in how long it will take you to finish and stuff like that, so you could make decisions. And I just think, I agree with you that they could have built it out to be a bit more compelling, and therefore I think, you know, made it something that was a bit more compulsory and necessary to the game. But as it was, I wasn't there for that stuff necessarily, and so despite liking the story quite a bit, and I think that you know, androids and stuff, and you know, the relationship stuff was quite well done, I wasn't really into the side characters in a way I think they wanted me to be.
I mean, we can talk about it in the next segment. I actually think a game this year that did that quite well, and they made it part of the mainline story, was actually Death's Door. I think the way that some of the writing and the way they introduced characters into a kind of Zelda-like experience, and then we're going to disagree on what that game is, whatever. But it kind of, that was a way where I did care about the characters, and I wanted that. And it just felt like Unsighted just bites off an absolute ton of mechanics, and one of those is the relationship building and all these NPCs. And it's just one area that I think just needed a little more, I don't know, love and care, attention, or like either improve it or take it out, because it's kind of, it's a little bit bloated in what the rest of the game is going for, and I think there's definitely room to improve there, but it doesn't hinder the overall experience too much for me at all. And I just think it's for what this game does well with its dungeon design. And I said it on the last show, but having dungeons that just have a million entrances and exits, I think is a fantastic use of real estate when it comes to space in a video game and getting around the map, because I never felt like, oh, I've got to traipse through this dungeon, because I could literally go through one dungeon to go between two other dungeons, whereas in Zelda, the vast majority of dungeons, there's an entrance to the dungeon, and the dungeon is like a space unto itself, and it's not so much going through it.
Yeah, there's a whole like place you have to go through to get there. They're all spread out in different places. That's a really great point in terms of the density of the world, like how well it uses the space that it has, and it's a decent amount of space that it has. But like there's smart, clever ways in which they go between each other, and like there are elevators that go up to the high parts.
It's very Metroidvania in that sense. Obviously, different camera perspective, but sure. Linking it all together in a really meaningful way. And there's a kind of collecting thing near the end of the game that I didn't actually find was too laborious, where often other games
I actually really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah,
you know?
They sold it well to me, and they gave me, I don't want to spoil it, but they gave you a good reason to want to go and do them all before the final ending, and I liked that a lot. And yeah, it's very glad you made me play this one, MBZ, and I look forward to talking about it in the next segment.
Yeah, I guess last thing I wanted to ask is, you didn't have much of an opinion on dungeons last time because you hadn't gotten deep into them. What do you think now, having finished the game, and do you agree with me in terms of like these are some of the best non-Zelda dungeons out there?
Yes, I wasn't as impressed with the spinner as I was hoping to be. But it was still cool. And it was then some weapons after the spinner and the later dungeons that I was just like, this is fantastic. Like the dungeon design is very, very, very strong.
I think it just gets better and better, right? By the point of that fifth one where you're just, man, there's some really cool stuff in that fifth one.
The fifth one is the best, I agree. And yeah, there's just some real, not brain busting, but like, okay, this point leads to here, and I've got to work out how do I get back and do this. And I just don't feel like I do that enough in games these days.
Sure.
And I do like, I don't need this really complicated, how does this link to that? But, you know, a game I played earlier this year, Oracle of Ages, has some very strong dungeons, bar one. And I think that game was very good at, you know, just testing you enough in terms of backtracking and knowing where to go next. And I think Unsighted does that really good balance as well. It's not just a linear dungeon and you know exactly where to go next. There's a little bit of thinking, but not too much. A bit like a Metroid Dread, you know, there's a bit of thinking on where to go next, but it's not just this massive conundrum of, oh my god, what am I actually meant to do? I think both those games just get it right in terms of, here's a clue of where you're probably meant to go, and you can work it out yourself. And there's a real satisfaction with doing that. Because I mean, I didn't need to use a guide, I don't think, for any of the dungeons, and I think that's always a good barometer. If I feel I'm just going to guides to look up something, I'm like, yeah, this probably could have been a tad easier for me personally, and I never did that, which is always good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's great to hear, and obviously we'll be talking about it next segment, which we'll be coming to in a bit. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this break to talk about the games of the year. See you in a bit. All right, everyone, welcome back to the final half of today's show, the big chunky section, which is where we talk about the video games. What are the best on the Nintendo of the year? It's a fun time, it's a good time, and it's been pretty good, I think, this year generally in terms of variety when it comes to video games. On Nintendo's part, I would say there's been some highs, there's been some lows, and some kind of in the middle stuff as well. Not the greatest year of all time, but I think probably maybe better in some ways than last year. It's just been a weird couple of years, I think, with Nintendo, especially with COVID and all the stuff going on with stuff being delayed. And, hopefully next year we'll have a lot of fun stuff. Seems like their lineup is looking a bit better, but who knows, man? Things have been a bit weird for the last, couple of times. So we'll see how it goes, but it's going to be enjoyable, going to be fun, and we're going to kick things off with some community emails, sending in your picks for your favourite games of the year. So we'll kick it off, Bally, with one from Jackpot.
I've got Jackpot from Vancouver, Canada. It says their top 5 Nintendo games. Number 5, Knockout City. Ah yes, 2021, the year of Dodgeball, a fun distraction from the usual shooter battle royale online. Halo might change that now. Number 4, Unpacking. An unexpectedly touching story that I really related to as someone on the cusp of 30. Those sentimental items that show up in each new home hit me in the feels. The game gets a bit tedious at times, but should be commended for its uniqueness. Number 3, Monster Hunter Rise. I'm by no means a huge fan of Monster Hunter, nor have I grinded out much of the post-game content. However, running through the main story of Rise with a group of friends for 30-ish hours was a ton of fun and enough to earn 3rd spot. Who knew Switch Online could work so well? Number 2, Dodgeball Academia. I found this game to be genuinely hilarious. Who knew a dodgeball RPG would work so well? Excited to see what Pocket Trap does next. And number 1, Metroid Dread. Welcome back, Samus. Loved this game from front to back. Many others will likely have a lot to say about Dread, so I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Love to see some Dodgeball Academia love in there. Obviously a game that is unique and different, and hopefully one we'll be talking about later on in the show.
We really missed Monster Hunter Rise this year, didn't we?
We did, yes.
That could have been a good one, but yeah. It's hard to get to everything.
It is. Great. Our next one comes in from PerryFan74 from Discord, who says, Dear Enemies and Bally, before I start my list of games from the past year, I have a question when it comes to reminiscing and ranking games of the year. What is your take on the idea of having to beat a game to be able to rank or contribute to the talk about said game during GOTY season? I've played and loved a lot of games this year, but most of them I never finished. Here are some games that really stayed in my mind over the year, regardless of completion. So I'll just go through these and maybe we can answer the question. Metroid Dread and Monster Hunter Rise are both my first real exposure in a long-running series. Both games made movement and traversal so much more fun than other entries in their series. No More Heroes 3. Played the first 2 and absolutely fell in love with them. Is 3 still jank and have an empty world? Yes. Does it improve the options in combat and have a smoother flow with one of the coolest main villains of the year? Yes. Lost in Random. I sadly see no one talking about this unique card/real-time arena combat narrative game from Zoink. It came out the same time as Eastward. Its art design is right out of a Leica film. It's a dark comedic world, and over-the-top characters are fun and memorable. Wish more people were talking about this game. Demon Turf, one of Platonic's first games in the publishing space. If you like the more platforming challenges of 3D World or the time shift zones of A Hat in Time, this game is totally worth a look. It also stands out with its Paper Mario-like use of 2D sprites in a 3D polygonal world. Fun movement and changing levels after a world boss keeps coming me back. Biomutant is a non-Tendo game that was released early in the year and was unfortunately forgotten. It is jank, but for an open-world game made from a team of 20 people, it's a world I like getting lost in and finding new ways to combo my movement abilities and crafting ridiculous weapons. Technicality, but I also wanted to shout out the DLC for Animal Crossing. Because of it, I clocked in another 100 hours into this funny little animal game. So yeah, nice list. There's lots of interesting picks that a lot of people have not talked about. Stuff like Lost in Random, No More Heroes 3 has gotten as much love as I maybe would have expected it to. But yeah, some cool stuff in that list. Bally, what do you think of this question of beating a game to contribute to chat about it during a game of the year kind of talk? What are your thoughts there?
If I play a game, I generally beat it. That's how I've kind of operated, I guess, since that we've started the podcast. I used to be very guilty for just not beating games, and so as a result, I very rarely have to make the decision, I've not finished this game, does it count? And then this year, a game like Halo Infinite, for example, I'm still working my way through that campaign, played quite a bit of the multiplayer, and I'm counting it in my lists like it because I really like what I've played so far. That's more just because it's come out in December. It's not to do with me not enjoying the game, therefore I've not beaten it. And generally, if I don't finish a game, it's not going to make high up my list anyway, because I will have bounced off it, and that rarely happens. But occasionally, I'll just be like, yeah, I don't need to see the end of this game. And then, so everything that's in the top of my list, or in my lists generally, I've definitely beaten.
Yeah, I think you can make whatever decision you want when it comes to your game playing habits, whether you can count something for Game of the Year, even if you've barely played any of it, right? Which is maybe weird in a sense of like, this is my favorite game, but I only played an hour of it for whatever reason. But sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes you just don't have the time to sit down with something, or the time to really dig into it, but you did really, really enjoy it. And I think that's totally valid, and you can kind of make whatever decision you want depending on like how much you played of the game. Like, if I'm honest, you really, for most games, you don't need to play through all of them to get a sense of whether you like them or not. Especially someone like me who like really understands what I like, and like when games, you know, start and they have a certain cadence, and I understand that quite quickly. Like the Gunk is a good example, right? I played, you know, the first 45 minutes of that, and I'm like, I know my entire opinion on this game already. Like, I can tell you exactly what it's going to be, and I don't think it's going to change by the end, and that's fine. But I do still want to go through it and finish it just for the sake of having seen the whole thing. And I think part of doing a podcast, I like to personally speak to the totality of an experience. So if I'm putting my opinion down on something to say, look, I really didn't like Red Dead Redemption 2, that's because I did play through the whole thing, right? Like, and I could have, you know, dropped it and said, you know, I'm not going to waste my time on this anymore. And maybe that would be been the smarter thing to do, right? There's the whole sunk cost fallacy and all that stuff. But from a personal perspective, I like having a whole view on a game. I think it's nice, but I don't think it's necessary. I think you're totally valid and fine to have played, you know, 5 hours of Tales of Arise and say it's one of your favorite games of the year, because frankly, that game's a JRPG that probably just stays quite similar throughout the course of playing it, you know?
And, you know, there's so many people in the industry and podcasts that I listen to where, because they're constantly trying to play the newest thing, they very rarely finish games, and sometimes I actually find that frustrating. I just like them to say, actually, this game that I've been playing, I really enjoy it, and because I really enjoy it, I've finished it, and, you know, it's one of my favorite games of the year. So I do enjoy the fact that we generally do beat games to completion, and we'll be honest about that fact, and we don't try and play every single thing as much as we still try and cover a lot of games. I think that there is value in having, whether it's a positive or negative view of a game, having that total view on it. Although I agree, opinions that haven't beaten the full game are obviously valid, but you know, I prefer people who perhaps have beaten the whole game if they're going to come in and say it's really good or really bad, or, you know, have a strong opinion on it perhaps.
It gives you stronger ammunition, potentially, when you're like, well, look, Bally, I don't think this should be this high on the list because I played the whole thing and here is my opinion of why. So, you know, it helps in that case. But yeah, I think it's fine either way, you know. And if you're just doing your own personal game of the year list, who the hell cares, man? You could put like chess on that for all I care, right? Like, it's your list. Do what you want with it. Cool.
Cool. So our final emails from Tim, and this was actually on Discord, says, I have a mixed Nintendo non-Tendo list every year since I usually don't play too many new games. This year I played 8, which is more than usual for me, actually. Honorable mention, The Gunk. Releasing a game on December 16th makes it hard to put on a GOTY list. I'm probably going to count this as a 2022 game because I'm really looking forward to playing it. Image and Form is a top-notch studio. Number 8. Halo Infinite. I've only played a bit of multiplayer so far, but it feels great. The grappling hook is such a fun addition. Number 7, Dark Deity. I had high hopes for this indie Fire Emblem, but it just didn't hook me. I only played about half the game, hoping to finish it next year. Number 6, Moonglow Bay. My wife and I enjoyed relaxing in this little world and doing some fishing and cooking together. Despite some bugs, it's just a nice, chill game. Number 5, Forza Horizon 5. This is my first Forza and I still haven't put a ton of time into it yet. If I had, this might be even higher. I wanted to try it out this year, but really didn't expect to enjoy it this much. I was pleasantly surprised how much fun it is to drive around and explore. By the way, the classical music radio station elevates the entire game. I love it. Number 4, Imposter Factory. Ken Gao does it again. It didn't hit me as hard as To the Moon or Finding Paradise, but I still loved experiencing this story. Number 3, The Forgotten City. I love a good mystery, and this game sets up an excellent little world with crazy secrets to uncover and intriguing characters with phenomenal writing. Number 2, MLB The Show 2021. This game puts other sports games to shame with its commitment to honouring MLB history and its tight, challenging gameplay. Regular updates and events kept me coming back nearly every day for most of this spring and summer. EA wishes they could make a FIFA or Madden even close to this good. Number 1, Metroid Dread. There's really nothing more to add here. It's the best 2D Metroid by a mile. A little bit of railroading barely detracts from the amazing feel of movement and the perfect level of challenge. Just the hype of a 2D Metroid is enough to make me happy with Nintendo, despite this being the only new Nintendo game I played the entire year.
Very good. Love to see Imposter Factory in there. One of my favorite games of the year. Kangao, just like a brilliant creator, and that is like a fantastic game that I hope will come to Switch soon. Obviously, the other 2 games are already on Switch, but yeah, definitely would be great to see. Also, Dark Deity, shout out to that, because I saw a bunch of people in the Fire Emblem community talking about it, and seemed like it was a little unfinished when it came out on Steam. So I have it on my wish list and would like to check it out at some point. But yeah, as a Fire Emblem fan, of course, definitely Dark Deity is on my list to have a look at some point.
I'd chat out Moonglow Bay. It's not on Switch. I think it might come to Switch if they can iron out all the bugs and make sure that it's a good port. That would be handy, because I do think that game would appeal to a lot of people who own the Switch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, has those farming chill vibes that people like.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, thanks everyone for sending those in. Obviously, we also did a community game of the year kind of vote thing that we will talk about after we have done our list. But that was fun to read through and to add up all the points, basically. But I'll talk about that afterwards, I guess. For now, Bally, let's get into it. The Game of the Year 2021 for Nintendo Switch, of course. We have a list of 19 games that we have played that came out on Switch, and we have to decide a top 10 for them. So, do you want to get started here, Bally, by just reading through the list that we have in terms of the number of games, alphabetically, as you have so nicely ordered them?
So we have Axiom Verge 2, Cyber Shadow, Death's Door, Dodgeball Academia, Eastward, Famicom Detective Club, Flynn Son of... tripping up over these names. Famicom Detective Club, Flynn Son of Crimson, Mario Golf Super Rush, Metroid Dread, New Pokemon Snap, Rain on Your Parade, Say No More, The Great Ace Attorney 2, The Wild at Heart, Toem, Toree 3D, Unpacking, Unsighted, WarioWare, Get It Together.
Lovely stuff. A nice list of lots of indie stuff, some Nintendo stuff in there, some interesting games to chat about. Usually, I think what we do is we start off by saying this thing probably won't make it, and cutting it and taking it off the list. So let's get started there. Bally, do you have a choice here that you think this is cool, but it's probably not going to make it into the top 10, and therefore let's talk about it and give it its day?
Yeah, I talked about it on talked about it this show, but I'm going to go Toree 3D. It's neat. It's no way going to be a top 10.
No, of course not. I definitely think there's a value in... It's really weird, because I think there's a lot of trash that goes on the eShop, right? Like, every week there's a bunch of rubbish, and a lot of it is very cheap, and a lot of it is very bad, and I think it's nice that a game like Toree 3D, which is cheap, but is good and is fun, has, like... got a little bit of a spotlight shone on it, right? I think NintendoLife did a video about the game, and like it actually got a little bit of traction on Twitter, and the guy seemed like he was happy with the way it had sold and stuff like that. So it's really nice to see a really tiny small game that, you know, doesn't have too much to it, but is good and decent, getting a lot of love. So happy to see that. And shout out to Dan from Project Falcon Punch, who actually was the person who tweeted about it to how I found out about it in the first place, and was like, yeah, check this out. And I did, and it was cool. So, very cool game. Cool. I will take a game off the list. I'm going to take off Say No More. It's a really interesting one. We've got a review code for this. It's a game where you say no, and you say no in a lot of different ways. You're kind of this intern at this company, and it's it's like this almost anti-capitalist story in a fun kind of light way that's quirky and weird. I would almost call it a walking simulator or like a visual novel in a sense, but like it's very different from either of those things. It is this whole weird, unique thing where you're kind of like going through on rails through these areas, and people will pop up to you, and you almost like blast them away by just saying no to them in various different ways. And the most fun thing about it is using the Indian voice, because obviously my background is Indian, and speaking, the guy talking in Hindi was saying no in Hindi, and that was a fun thing, and I thought it was cool representation, and I enjoyed saying nay to people a bunch, and in a thick Indian accent. It was great. But I don't think the game is actually that interesting as a game.
Okay.
It runs really nicely on Switch though. It looks really nice, and it's just a weird vibe. It's just a super weird game. But yeah, it's cool. But I don't think it lands on a top 10, unfortunately, with some of the competition we have here today.
Yeah. In a weaker year, I think this game might just scrape in at a pinch into the top 10, but it's way too vanilla of a game to be considered in this top 10, and I'd like to drop Mario Golf Super Rush.
Yeah. Oh, maybe let's just have a quick chat about Mario Golf. You, Bally, a big Mario Golf fan. Obviously, since the N64 and Game Boy days, you know, you've always loved your sports games with Mario in it. And it's been a while since you played one of those. So I think, like, for you, this was kind of a coming home of like, all right, here we go. This looks good. Hopefully it'll be good. And it turned out that it's not great, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the time away from Mario Golf made me build up in my mind too much of what this game could be or what I wanted it to be, and in the end it was a very vanilla game. I think the story mode is fine. Like it took me, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, and I don't know, I just wanted more RPG mechanics, and having played a game like Golf Story since I've last dipped into Mario Golf, that is just an incredible golf RPG that I kind of wanted Mario to lean more towards. And the standard golf mechanics are fine. Like, I think they're serviceable. I might play more of that game this year just to chill out with like a podcast, just when we go down south and stuff, and just chill out on my Switch. But I think I just wanted more, and I think where we're waiting on a game like Sports Story, you know, that's where I want my sports games to be. And yeah, Mario Golf, and also all the running to get to your ball. I
know you weren't a big fan of that.
I hated all of that stuff. I just think,
you know, like the cross-country golf stuff, I actually was a bit of a fan of. I thought it was probably the most fun stuff in the game. As frustrating as it could get, of like, you'd have those cliff edges and like the wind that you'd have to like get into the wind to push it up to the higher ledge. Like, there was almost a weird puzzle element to the game in that way that I enjoyed for what it was. But I'll agree with you in that, like, a lot of that stuff could get frustrating in a way that just it didn't really feel earned, right? I feel like that game should have done so much more with that concept, and it didn't go far enough with it. And it's nice that they're, you know, supporting it and doing extra courses. We played a bit of that New Donk City course over your stag weekend. That was good fun, but there wasn't a lot to it, I think. And, you know, I think multiplayer is probably the best way to do this game, and it probably speaks to how little you're into it, that you've not been like, oh, let's play online and let's have a match against each other. So
I'm still up for doing that. I think we could still have a good time. And like I said, I think the standard golf mechanics are good, are fine.
They're solid,
They're solid, but they're nothing special. And wanted more from this game.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I am going to get rid of Rain on Your Parade. This was a little game that came out earlier in the year, and I think it just has a really neat concept. The idea that you're this cloud that is going around spaces and is raining on various things to solve problems or to do puzzles or to help people out is just a neat concept. And I like the aesthetic of it, where it is kind of like a cardboard cutout, and it's on strings, and so it's almost like this kind of puppeteering thing that when you move around on the screen, it moves like it's being controlled by somebody, and all the kind of environment and stuff have that like creative, like cut out look to them. You know, there's a crafty nature to this game, and I think there are some clever designs and a lot of variety, right? Like it's got this overworld map where you go from level to level, and every level has you doing something slightly different. Eventually, like it feels like it runs out of steam by the end, and I kind of wanted it to finish a bit sooner than it did. Like there's a whole level that is an entire like Zelda like mini story where you like go to a town and talk to NPCs and then go into a dungeon and do like mini puzzles, fight a boss. Like it's got some really cool elements to it that surprised me and I thought that were quite unique. It's also a little jank, which you kind of expect from a kind of smaller budget game like this, and that's totally fine. But it means it doesn't have the level of polish or kind of for me it didn't like net up there in terms of the best stuff of the year. I just thought it was a cool thing that I enjoyed quite a bit, that I think it is worth playing. But yeah, it's not doing anything particularly special, as cool as the idea is. Okay. I do really like it. So, but yeah, not gonna make it, I think, in terms of the best games here, unfortunately.
I'm gonna be honest. I think there's so many games on this list that are like of a similar quality that I'm already struggling to drop something and would...
It's hard, yeah,
I'd be in favor of promoting a few things and whittling down this middle of the pack section. Don't know what you think about that.
I have one that I would like to suggest that we probably both agree on shouldn't be in the top 10. And it saddens me because it was one of the games I was most looking forward to this year. It's Cyber Shadow.
Yeah, I think it can go. I thought there was a chance of it scraping at number 10, but I think looking at this list, I think it's struggling to do that.
It will struggle. So the thing I want to say about Cyber Shadow is I think it's a good game. I do really like it, and I think it has excellent music. The music is really good. Really good. And a fantastic soundtrack. Level design is there. For me, it was, and I think this is the conversation we've had just throughout the year, and the thing we always come back to with the game is like it just felt a bit too much of a kick in the balls. It's just a couple of levels too high in terms of if they had figured out like the checkpointing in a way that was a little more fair, I might have had this on a top 10 list, right? Like, because I do think on a mechanical level, like, it really hits a lot of notes that I like. It's doing stuff that The Messenger did. It's doing stuff that Shovel Knight did in a cool way, like visually, in terms of its artwork and its pixel style. I think Cyber Shadow has a vibe that I really am into, but there's just a part of it that doesn't quite come together with some of the unfairness of the enemies and just some of the movement that just felt... Sometimes it felt like the whole slice and then jump idea didn't quite work in the way that you expected it to, and it felt like it should have like mechanically held together a bit better over some of those harder sections. And alongside just the lack of good checkpoint, like the checkpointing I think is good because there's no live system and you don't have to like redo whole sections, but it just felt like it was always one screen too far away. You know what I mean?
It was just so brutal, and by the end of the game you're chaining together platforming with bullet hell enemies with, I think there's knockback on being hit as well, and it's like just the combination of it all, it was like, God, this is brutal. And some of the bosses are actually maybe the best bits of the game alongside the music actually. And early in the year, and I was just like, I think we were both really keen to just play like a new game because it had been a while. And
it was published by Yacht Club as well,
and
right?
Published by Yacht Club, of course, and it came to Game Pass, and we were both really keen on it. And I was really bruised from this. I was like, man, do I regret beating that game? Like that kind of guilty feeling of I really had to like endure to get through some of the later stages. Which is a shame because I think the earlier stages before it gets too hard are like really kind of the level of difficulty I was hoping for more with this game.
Exactly.
And don't be fooled by the Yacht Club publishing because it's a whole lot tougher than Shovel Knight, like so much tougher. I actually think Shovel Knight is a fantastic level of difficulty, and this game is not that. Yeah,
sad, but I think it's not going to make it into this top 10. I think there's too many other games that we love for it to slide in there. So
that's fair.
Unfortunate. Okay, so do you want to promote some stuff into the top 10 then, Bally?
I would like to promote Eastward.
Yeah, I agree. Eastward should definitely be in the top 10. That's an easy pick. A game that I'm sure we'll talk about more later on in these discussions of these video games. I think Metroid Dread should be at the top. Are you surprised? Metroid Dread, one of the best games of the year. I think so. Yes, that is true. Definitely should be.
Action game of the year. according to the
yeah,
Game
action
Awards.
adventure. Actually, I'll have you know.
Of course,
Come on,
yes,
get the
yes.
category right, Bally. Cool. Is there another one you want to put up there so far?
I'd like to put up Death's Door.
Okay. Yeah, I can see it. And I would like to follow that up by saying Unsighted should be in the top 10 as well. So I think those are a solid 4 to put up there so far. Is there anything else you want to put up, or is there something you want to maybe discuss about whether things should be taken off?
There's one more I think is near to a lock, if not a lock, and that is Unpacking.
Okay.
Don't know how you feel about that.
I feel it's definitely in the conversation. I wouldn't say it's an absolute lock for the top 10, but I think it's in the conversation. I don't think I'd move it up just yet, personally.
Sure.
But we can discuss that, I guess. Looking at this list, I think that probably the weakest link, even though I think the game is really good, just because I'm the only one who's played it, is Flynn, Son of Crimson. The game is... It's just a very solid side-scrolling action game that I think could be mistaken for a Metroidvania because you can go back to previous spaces, but it is like you have an overworld and you have levels that you go between, and it does the thing where if you go through a screen, you can't go back to the previous screen, so it almost like locks you off like a platformer in a way. But it's an action game. It's a side-scrolling action game where you upgrade stuff and you have like light RPG elements with a skill tree, and you get new swords and new weapons and new abilities. And I just think it's rock solid, right? If you want a game that you can turn your brain off and have some really snappy, tight-feeling action where you're rolling behind enemies, you're hitting them, you're jumping, you're doing a bunch of combat stuff, but also platforming and exploration with some great pixel art. Honestly, really, really nice. I think Flynn, Son of Crimson is a perfect play it over Christmas game, and I would really recommend people check it out because I think it's definitely flown under the radar, and not a lot of people have given it love. And obviously now I'm not giving it love because I'm suggesting we take it off the list, but it's not remarkable in any way, right? And I think for Game of the Year, I want to reward stuff that really punched, that really hit. And I think I had a great time playing this. It was 6 hours or so, and I just locked into the zone, really enjoyed the feel of it and the jumping and the hitting stuff. I always want one of these every year, just a game that I can just zone into and really enjoy. And I think Flynn, Son of Crimson is so solid, so solid. So I don't think me taking this off is an indictment on its quality. If we're going to talk about an honorary number 11 on the list, it could be this, right? I think it absolutely, it just doesn't make it into the conversation because I don't think it is unique enough or doesn't break through in any innovative way. Which, not to say that that's the only thing we're rewarding here, but you know what I mean, right?
That's
it's just it's a great game, and I really do think Flynn, Son of Crimson, if you never heard of it before, I think one of my favorite things about doing Game of the Year stuff is shouting out stuff that is lesser known, and I even though we're not putting it on the list, I do give people my wholehearted recommendation of that game. It's really, really fun.
Cool.
Cool.
I'll just run through the 9 games that we've got in the middle here. So they either have to go up or down. And so there's 6 slots remaining in our hypothetical
Which
top
could
10.
change, right?
It can change.
Stuff
But
out,
at the moment, in the middle, we've got Axiom Verge 2, Dodgeball Academia, Famicom Detective Club, New Pokemon Snap, The Great Ace Attorney 2, The Wild at Heart, Toem, Unpacking, and WarioWare Get It Together.
Yeah. Lots of good stuff here. I kind of want to push Axiom Verge 2 into the top 10 personally. I don't know how you feel about that, if you're not as on, locking it in or what you think, but
it's one of a few in this list I'd be up for doing that with. Yeah, for sure.
For me, I found that such a unique version of what you could have done with a sequel to Axiom Verge that I really enjoyed a great deal, and I think that given what you could have expected from it, given what we've seen with Guacamelee and Guacamelee 2, it could have gone in a very similar direction, but ultimately I think it comes out the other side as this more unique game that does something different that I haven't necessarily seen before in the Metroidvania space.
Yeah, I think Axiom Verge 2 can probably go up now. I mean, I'd obviously be keen to stick Unpacking in there as well with it.
Yeah.
Both of them, just shove them up for now. I don't know how you feel about that.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, we can put them both up for now.
Let's
then
do
in
that.
that case, I think that works. It makes sense, and we'll maybe have to decide whether or not they stay or if they are the type of game that we want on there by the end, which is getting tricky now because it's not many slots available with number of games that we have left. Okay, so I think there's a couple of Nintendo games in here, a few actually, that are interesting, and could they make it, could they not? It's kind of a toss-up. I know you personally really loved New Pokemon Snap, and I totally understand if you want to see it in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I'd quite like to see it in at the bottom of that list. If you convince me otherwise, that's totally okay as well, but like, I personally would quite like to see it just kind of scrape in. And I personally preferred it to a game like The Wild at Heart, for example. Like, I thought that was a really neat little game. I really enjoyed it. I think another one on Game Pass. It kind of didn't run the best, but I think just mechanically it was doing a lot of really cool things that, yes, it was just kind of 2D Pikmin in a way, but it had a couple of mechanics that were like a bit different to that game that I did really enjoy. But I probably enjoyed New Pokemon Snap more, where I had that longing for like a Pokemon Snap game, and I think this game did deliver on that. I do think Pokemon Snap fans really enjoyed it. I think a lot of people perhaps who were new to Pokemon Snap kind of came to that game maybe hoping for more than what the game actually was, and they were maybe left, some of those people might have been left a bit disappointed, but I think people who really enjoyed that in the original N64 game, like, it really got a glow up on that game. Like, people talk about Kenna Bridge of Spirits being like a PS2 game with a glow up. Like, New Pokemon Snap is an N64 game with like a substantial glow up. Like, I think it really sticks to the original formula in such a stubborn way at times that I think maybe made it trickier for some people. But for me, I kind of loved that about it.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's obviously very tied to nostalgia, and I think that game is cool. I personally just had trouble getting into it. I enjoyed it for what it was, but I think for me, just going through the same spaces again and then like having to look around to different spots to maybe get a shot of something, even though I didn't know what to do. Like, would I have to throw a ball at it? Would that do anything? Is it, giving it, the bait stuff or the fruit, whatever. Like, sometimes that did something, sometimes it didn't. It wasn't clear sometimes. Like, when I took a shot, the reason for why it was a 4-star, not a 3-star, or not a 2-star, like, what was the difference between some of these shots? I sometimes couldn't even tell, like, what the animation windows and stuff. It just, for me, it wasn't clear enough on those aspects to make me want to go and figure it out for myself, because it felt like it would just be an exercise in frustration of like, all right, I played the desert level 6 times in a row and I haven't made any progress in terms of new star ratings for different photos. Like, I would then have to go online and look up, and I don't think that should really be the fun of this game. I think you should be able to deduce it, and I just don't think the game does a good job of letting you deduce that stuff. As fun as it is, I felt like if they were going to take an approach to a Pokemon Snap sequel, they should have taken a more open approach to it and not had the rails be a thing. Like, maybe this is a thing that they'll do in Pokemon Arceus, because you have an open world, you can go around and maybe you'll be able to take pictures of Pokemon there, and that could be a fun thing to do. And again, I didn't really get into the original that much, so one of the other things I think the original does quite well is the evolution stuff, where you cause these evolutions through these fun little interactions, and I think that is very clear, because like, clearly it's a different Pokemon, it's a different thing that you're taking a picture of, and in this, it's just like different poses, and like sometimes fun stuff happens with the magical, like the special Pokemon, but that stuff is very much on rails. I think of like is it a Steelix, or like there's a level with something burrowing around a tunnel, and that one just took me ages to get right, because it was
one of like the pseudo bosses in the game.
And it's like you have such tight timing windows in order to get those photos taken that I was just like, oh man, and I have to go through this entire 5-minute sequence again just to get to the end, so that I can just keep one of the photos. That's the other thing, is like, you can only keep one of the photos, no matter if you've taken 5 amazing photos, only one per Pokemon, which was to me an artificial thing to make you go play the game more. So yeah, I feel like I'm coming off very negative on New Pokemon Snap. I did like it, I enjoyed it and I finished it, but it's just not a game I would go back to, and it's not really a game that I enjoyed enough to put it on.
Do you want to leave it in the middle for now, and we talk about another game?
Yeah, I think so.
There's a game here that I was critical of Mario Golf earlier. I said I just wanted more of a sports RPG from that game, and there's a game here that really delivered on that itch in Dodgeball Academia.
We should put Dodgeball Academia in the top 10.
We should. Obviously, it's not golf, and I didn't know much, if anything, about Dodgeball, but I think mechanically this game really holds up, and the Dodgeball matches just kept on being fun throughout the whole game, and it's like a 8 to 12 hour game.
Yeah,
it's like kind of long, and even by the very end I wasn't sick of the dodgeball mechanic, and considering you're doing countless like dodgeball matches a day, like as you play the game, I think it really held up. And the story, it's just a very strange, bizarre little school that you're in, and I like the way that all the characters interact and things. I think it was just a really cool little world, and there's just for such a what's perceived as a small indie studio, it's got a real crisp art style and level of polish that I would associate far more with like a AAA game, and it was just very impressive. So yeah, I'm happy to promote that now.
I think every year there is a TNL pick on this list, like a game that no one else was talking about, that both of us loved, that probably won't actually make it into our personal top 10s, but we both like have passion for it in a way. And to me, like, usually a game is like Extermination Force. Like, that's the perfect summation of like.
Yeah. But we'll definitely get in on the Nintendo list, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Dodgeball Academia for me is like a game that we both really loved and were like, this is great. Why is nobody talking about it? And still no one is talking about it. And that makes me sad. And I think the game is awesome. And as you mentioned, like it's got a great level of polish. Like it does such goofy, fun things. The writing is excellent and funny. Like there are so many amazing moments in that game that I was super fond of. And I think even though there might be other games that I personally would have higher on my own list that may not have made it onto this list, I think Dodgeball Academia should make it on this list because it's the TNL pick of the year for me. It's just like it's such a cool thing. I love it so much. Great. So we've got a few more here. How many slots do we got left? We've got three more slots. Left. I think we've got 7 on the list at the moment. So three more slots to take.
I'd be up for dropping the Wild at Heart. I don't know how you feel.
Let's talk about it. So I think the Wild at Heart and Dodgeball Academia are really two interesting games because I think they both fit this like potential of a TNL pick. Mm-hmm. The reason I think Dodgeball Academia makes it and the Wild at Heart doesn't is that the Wild at Heart I think started very strong. Like I think we both got into it and were like, oh my god, this is like a 2D Pikmin in a really cool way.
Yeah, it does have a strong start.
And I think it just has such great like ideas with that stuff and the design of the space, and I really like the art style as well. It reminds me of like Knights and Bikes, and like it has a really cool vibe to it, that kind of kids in the woods type of thing. And I felt that as the game went on and as it became a bit more complicated and you're trying to manage all your kind of guys, I don't even remember the name of them, I just call them Pikmin at this point because that's basically what they are. There were good puzzles, and definitely there's sections where you split apart the two characters and you have to like interlink with each other, but then like there's the scariness of the guy coming out at night, and sometimes that adds a time pressure that I wasn't a big fan of. But like there were some frustrations I think in the back half of the game where I couldn't quite figure out what I needed to do or how I was supposed to get past a certain thing. And as much as I really loved it, and I think it's probably the best a smaller studio has had a shot at doing a Pikmin style game, I don't think it quite made it for me into that upper echelon. But I still think it's great. I still really enjoyed the Wild at Heart, and I'd recommend people check it out. It's a cool thing, and if you are a Pikmin fan, I think you get a lot out of this game, right? Like it has the kind of management of these different creatures and like using them in battle, but also using them in really clever puzzles. I don't know how you feel overall about it, but I think I agree with you. I think like it could have made this list in a different universe. Like if they'd done a few things different and maybe streamlined certain elements, I could see this being on the list because I think we both really love Pikmin, and I think this is a great version of that in 2D.
Yeah, I think it's almost there. It's like it's almost there to just being a really great game, and I think there's just too many other, especially indies on this list that are already in that top 10, like Dodgeball Academia, Unpacking, Action Verse 2, Unsighted. Like these are just like indies that I think have really hit it out of the park this year, and in a way that the Wild at Heart is almost there but isn't quite. And that's a shame because, you know, I love a studio that's going to try doing like a smaller style Pikmin game. And you're right, the opening is so strong. But then, yeah, some of the puzzles, you're right, that I love a puzzle, but I don't like a time pressure on a puzzle. And the day-night cycle, and I don't really feel this as much in actual Pikmin for whatever reason. But in this game, you could have one character on one end of the screen getting attacked because it's become night, and they don't actually have a way of getting back to safety because there's a lot of one-way doors.
Right, getting stuck in those situations as a real pressure that I didn't like. If it was starting to become dark, I would like, okay, I don't want to start this puzzle. I have to walk all the way back to my area, then rest so that I can have the start of a full day in order to like feel good about starting that puzzle and not because obviously you're trying to figure it out at the same time, and so there's you know the time pressure just matters in that way.
Yeah, totally. And it didn't run the best. This was back before I had the Series X, so I was playing on Xbox One, and it was just the sound was cutting out. It was like glitchy, and it wasn't the most smooth of experiences.
The Switch version sounds like it's good though, which
is good to hear, and that did get ported later this year, so that's good. But yeah,
well, the heart, cool little game,
very cool.
All right, I guess we have a few more slots on this list, and I think there are some games that definitely I want to be on there. For my personal pick, I have to put The Great Ace Attorney on this list. I think it is one of the best Ace Attorney games and really takes this different setting and puts it in a way that like has its own established storyline that is very compelling and you know has this really interesting interlink between Japan and Great Britain in that period of time. I think there are some great twists, especially in the second game, that like the music in this series is just unbelievably good. I really love it, and I think this is the one from those that I would say it kind of has to be in the top 10 for me. Not that it has to be up high in the top 10, but like I'm a huge Ace Attorney fan. I think I'd love to represent that on this list. And I played just the second game this year because I had played the first one before. And I don't think the first one maybe would have made the list. But I think when you consider both games together as one whole story, which I think really is meant to be experienced as one whole giant Ace Attorney game, I think it sings, honestly. And yeah, the ending, it doesn't like nail everything. I don't think it comes out with necessarily a big twist in the end. I think it's kind of obvious, like, who the power behind the chair is, but like it's so effective at getting up to that point that I don't think that matters necessarily because some of the cases, and especially even the boring cases, right, usually that you have a case that's not as related to the main overarching plot, and that case in this game is one of my favorite ones of those in the series, so like that just elevates this to another level, I think, and I think it should be on there. So
sure.
Yes.
We can do that. I think that's a good speech. That's
Sweet.
worth it. I know you really enjoyed that game earlier this year, so
I loved it. Yeah, I put obviously we had our Switch stats from Nintendo for the end of the year, and that was my number one played game on Switch, 38 hours into, and that was only one of the two games, just to tell you how big that package is. 38 hours. I did actually replay the first case of game one, so that probably adds a few hours on there, but yeah, that package is immaculate, and if you're an Ace Attorney fan, or if you've never played the series, it's actually a really great jumping in point for people if you've never played the series before, so I'd recommend it to a lot of people. Okay, we've got 4 more games here to decide on.
So we've got
what gets
2
in.
up, 2 down out of Famicom Detective Club, New Pokemon Snap, Toem, and WarioWare Get It Together.
Yeah. I think based on how much you like New Pokemon Snap, I think that probably gets into the top 10 at this point. What do you think?
I'd be very keen on that. I personally haven't played Famicom Detective Club and Toem, and we can talk about WarioWare in a second, but I'd be up for putting Pokemon Snap up there for now.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Much as I don't really like it that much, I think that your nostalgia for it and for the series holds a lot of weight, and I definitely appreciate that being there. So cool. Let's put New Pokemon Snap into the top 10. So we've got 1 slot left for the top 10, which we can decide which of these 3 games gets in.
Tell me about Toem.
Toem is awesome. I really like Toem. It obviously is this black and white adventure game where you're this kind of character who goes around taking pictures in the world. But I think the really cool thing about it is that you see the world from this isometric perspective and you can twist the camera about, but then you also go into first person to take pictures in the world. And these pictures range from like all the different creatures that you find about to going on quests and filling in a book. Basically, the idea is you're filling in the stamp book with stamps so that you can get a ticket to the next bus station. And the idea is to get to the end to see this fabled thing called the Toem, which is obviously what the game's named after. And that's kind of your goal. And you go through these like 5 different diorama areas with like a bunch of different scenes in them, and the quests that they give you are really fun in the way that I think a lot of adventure games fail in the way of giving you stuff that is a bit obscure and hard to understand, whereas this gives you like quests that have a little bit of mystery to them in terms of what you need to do, but are solvable in a satisfying and fun way, and it just has a very chill vibe to it. The whole game has a great chill vibe that I really enjoyed hanging out in. I thought that, the writing was funny and charming, and there are some secrets to find and like some really cool just areas that you explore and little bits that you do. All of it kind of builds together in a way that you explore the whole place, almost like pick up the quest as you go along, and then you kind of like retraverse it and go back and think, okay, well, I need to capture this certain moment, maybe it's over there, or I saw this thing over there, maybe that relates to this place. And because the world is kind of small, it's easy to move around between the areas, and it's just satisfying and well executed and has a great visual style, really, really charming. I just enjoyed it a great deal. And it also has the fun thing of you get to put the stamp wherever you want in your book. And so every time I would start a new page, I'd be like, okay, how am I going to lay out my stamps this time? Because, you don't know, where it's all going to land, and you just want to make it nice and symmetrical. At least I do. That's how my brain works, is like I need to have things nice and symmetrical. And so I like make a pattern deliberately for what my stamp book would look like every time. And yeah, just fun little creativity with that game. So I really like it personally. Of these 3, it might be my favorite of Famicom, Tom, and WarioWare, but I appreciate you also played WarioWare, and I also played WarioWare, and we loved WarioWare, and I think WarioWare is great fun. Obviously, I haven't gone back to it as much as I would like to. I do like the kind of weekly challenge stuff that they were doing. It was really good fun. But yeah, WarioWare is kind of like, it feels unique in that they're changing it up with these different characters, but at the same time it does feel like, yeah, it's another WarioWare. So how do you feel about it, Bally?
I'd be happy for WarioWare to get in on this list, but I'm totally prepared for you to either love Toem or Famicom Detective Club and argue for that to be on this list alternatively. I get that we've both played WarioWare and maybe that's more fitting, but I don't feel strongly if you'd rather have Toem. That's some pretty positive stuff about Toem, and I don't
really
have that to say about WarioWare, as much as I did have a good time with that game and I haven't come back to it.
Yeah, WarioWare is tough, right? Because I think it's anathema to a podcast like ours, because usually we roll credits and move on. And the issue with WarioWare is that it's 2 hours long and you roll credits, and I think WarioWare is at its best when you don't worry about that, and when you are just like, I'm just going to keep playing this and do high scores. And to be honest with you, I have been thinking about over the holiday just playing a bunch of WarioWare, because it's an easy pick up and play game in front of the TV, right? As I always talk about when my family's watching TV, I'm just playing Switch, right? So WarioWare is perfect for that. So I do see myself actually playing a lot more WarioWare over the holiday, and I really enjoyed it. I do think that there are some dud characters in there. Like, I don't like playing as 9 Volt's mom. I don't think she's great. I don't think that there's certain characters that I found just tricky to get along with and just were not the ones I gravitated towards. And so when you get to choose them, I'm like, usually I just go for the characters that can fly everywhere and shoot stuff, which is Ashley. Ashley, the best character in the game, like, no questions asked. She can fly everywhere quickly and shoot in any direction. Yes. Like, come on, she's perfect. But yeah, I usually gravitated towards the better characters, and I feel like the weekly challenge stuff is nice because it forces you out of that comfort zone sometimes and makes you be like, okay, we're going to do maximum speed with just 9 Volt for 30 minigames in a row. Off you go. How well can you do? And that was a good challenge that was fun and really hard to like figure out and get your timing nailed, which I think is just a great idea. And I obviously, I've missed a ton of weekly challenges now. The nice thing is that the game keeps them, so you can't like compete in them anymore, but you can go and find all the previous weekly challenges and play them of your own accord. So I might just do that. I might just go through and play all those and then see if I can, get into the scoreboards and the others. But I guess the other thing is, like, as other people on your friends list drop off and don't play it as much, that motivation starts to wane a bit more as well, so you don't have like the kind of friend motivation to do it as much. But Yeah, I mean, I could see WarioWare being. I could see Famicom Detective Club being on this list. Honestly, I really like Famicom Detective Club as a historical object, less so as a fun game, because I think it has a lot of frustrations. Both games do. And I've just put this as one game on the list because I think it's easier just to talk about as one thing. I think most people who played this will have played both of them, right? Because what kind of lunatic are you who's only playing one Famicom Detective Club game? I don't think those people exist, frankly, because if you know, basically. And I know, which is why I wanted to get into them. And I think, honestly, like, storytelling-wise, these are some really impressive things considering how old they are, and for the most part the writing is exactly the same and the story is exactly the same from back in the late 80s, and I think we've seen that what's his face from Metroid, Sakamoto, has definitely had less than ideal stories in his video games, cough other M. However, I think he shows writing chops in the Famicom Detective Club games because they are fun and interesting mysteries that are enjoyable to follow. And I just think that the mechanics side of it, the obscure, as I was talking about Toem not doing any of that stuff as an adventure game, Famicom Detective Club leans into the bullshit of adventure games of like, okay, I have to click the telephone twice to then click the curtains once so that I can trigger this guy to leave the room so that a dialogue happens, and a lot of that is just bad, and I just don't understand why Nintendo didn't streamline it, or at least had a mode in there that was like, his story mode, which, by the way, the great Ace Attorney has, where you can just click story mode and it will automatically pick the choices for you. So if you get stuck and you're like, I don't want to go to a guide to accidentally spoil myself, just click the story mode button, nice. And it just does it for you in the moment, which, wow, what a great thing. Famicom Detective Club really could have used that, and I think it would have been stronger if it had had the ability to do so, because I do remember moments sitting downstairs, like in the big armchair playing it, and late at night, and I was like, man, I don't know what the fuck to do. There are 4 locations here, there's 3 people, don't know what to say to any of them, don't know how to trigger the next thing. That's frustrating. So I can see it going. As much as I think, like, it's a cool number 10, I think, on a list, because it's just represented as, like, I love that Nintendo released this, and I want them to do more. I want them to make new modern Famicom Detective Club games. I think that would be amazing. But I don't think they did it all the way with the remake, which I think probably means that we shouldn't put it on the list. Sad as that makes me, because I think it is a really cool thing, I think they didn't modernize it in a way that they should have done, given that it's a full-blown remake. But it's also gorgeous. Oh my god, the art in this game is so good. I like the glow up they have given it is stunning, and yeah, really, really remarkable stuff. So, there's give and take, but I think given what I've said about these 3 games, I think Toem makes it, honestly. I think Toem is and you haven't played it, but I know that you're interested, and I think, honestly, I think you would like Toem the most of these 3 as well, if you were to play it.
I see that, and I think what you said about Toem was important, so yeah, I'd be happy for Toem to slide up into the top 10 and we cut the other 2.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Again, I'll play a bunch of WarioWare over Christmas, likely. That game is really fun. And Famicom Detective Club, shout out. I think that if you're a Nintendo nerd, if you're a history buff, if you want to see, what these games were, because they were never released. This is the first time, which is funny, like, we're including them in the new games section, because technically they are new for the West, right? It's like when Star Fox 2 came out and people were like, well, we've got to put Star Fox 2 in the Game of the Year conversation because it's new in our country this year. So, yeah. Amazing that this happened. I'm really happy, especially as it was a period of time in the year when Nintendo were going through a bit of a drought, so it was nice to have a release like this that wasn't getting overthrown by any other releases. Like, people were actually talking about it, which was cool. So okay, we've got a top 10.
We don't feel strongly about anything in the bottom games going into the top. We're happy with this top 10. I'm happy
now that I'm
top
looking
10.
at it, I think I am happy. Yeah, I think the only one I would say could make it is Flynn, Son of Crimson, but as I mentioned, that's probably honorary number 11.
Okay.
In a
we
way.
can make it honorary number 11 if you'd like.
Yeah,
if you were going to shoehorn it in, what would you want out?
See, that's hard, isn't it? I'm controversial. I would probably... Well, no, I'd probably take out New Pokemon Snap, but we've already had that conversation. Okay. That's probably the one I would take out. Yeah, I would, yeah. But yeah, we're not going to do that. So I think
we'll stick with this top 10 then.
I think I'm happy with this top 10 as it is right now. Cool. So I think now we want to order this list in a way that has number 10 all the way through number 1. So let's start at the bottom, I think, is what we usually do.
Why don't we go through the list?
Yes, Bally, give us a nice reminder to the audience of what we currently have in the list so far.
Our top 10 in no particular order at the moment is Eastward, Metroid Dread, Death's Door, Unsighted, Axiom Verge 2, Unpacking, Dodgeball Academia, The Great Ace Attorney 2, New Pokemon Snap, and Toem.
Yes, very good list. I'm pretty happy with that list. I think that there's great stuff that's come out this year, and I think that's well represented here. So happy to pick through it now.
I'm happy to volunteer New Pokemon Snap at 10 because I know you've got some issues with that game.
So I was waiting to have the conversation between Toem and New Pokemon Snap because
it might be tight, but I don't mind New Pokemon Snap being lower.
So just to make the case for it, I guess, like, these are 2 photography games, which makes it kind of fun in a way. I think Toem did what I wanted New Pokemon Snap to do, right?
Okay.
Which is like put me in a space where I can freely explore and have like challenges essentially associated with. Like, I think a Toem version of New Pokemon Snap could have been like quite high on a list for me personally.
It's fun because I could say the same about New Pokemon Snap. Like, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, where it basically was the N64 glow up I was hoping for. But yeah. Shall we stick at number 10 then? New Pokemon Snap?
Yeah, that would be nice. I would like to have it at number 10 and have Toem just a little step higher at number 9. Because for me, I think Toem achieved like a few different things, but I think being a photography game that the actual mechanics of the photography weren't that complicated, but like engaging in it was fun, and like you have this little encyclopedia book that you fill out of like the different animals that you see, and so some of it is just finding like little birds that are hiding behind these places that you just have to twist the camera in order to see them, and there are certain perspective things where you're like up on this top of this lighthouse, but then you have to go into first person view to look out and see like this entire sea and like all these islands out in the distance that you can't see from the regular perspective that you get. So I think it just does a lot of clever stuff that lets it kind of break the mold in a way. So yeah, I'm happy to have Toem at number 9.
Number 9.
Above New Pokemon Snap. I think that's probably as high as I can push it just because you haven't played it.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll put that there.
There's only one game on this list remaining that I've not actually played.
Yeah, which is The Great Ace Attorney 2.
Which is good, like that we've got a joint list that we've both played.
Yeah, exactly. I really like The Great Ace Attorney 2 in a way that I would like to push it up a slight amount, but I don't know what I would bring down. I think personally for me, Unpacking I thought was a really cool game. Really cool. However, I think the problem with it is that I eventually got not bored necessarily, but like I couldn't finish it all in like one sitting, right? Like I did like a whole room and I was like, oh, it's a lot of organizing stuff. And so I think sometimes it felt...
The whole game in one sitting, or...
No, just like... I wanted to...
A whole room in one sitting.
I wanted to have finished it before I did, but I just couldn't stomach myself to sit there and just continue to sort through boxes, right? There was almost a mimetic part of it that was like...
Isn't that the point of the game?
Yes, I know, but like in some times that's done in a way that I think works. I think it just because sometimes it gets a little bloated in the like number of rooms you have to do, the upstairs to down, especially the last level where you're doing the upstairs and the downstairs, and I felt it was a bit too close to the laboriousness of actually doing that task in real life, which like when you're trying to do that in games, I think you can kind of get to that point sometimes. And I agree with you, like that is in some ways the point, but I think actually the real point of it is much more to do with the narrative of the girl and like telling her story. And I think they could have achieved that in a slightly tighter way, if you know what I mean.
So I absolutely loved Unpacking. It's definitely not my number 8.
Okay.
I would push for loads of other stuff before, and we can talk about Unpacking later, hopefully. But like, I think it's some of the most innovative storytelling of the year, and I agree that it's a little long in the tooth, especially on that final level. It's like, there's a whole lot of actual unpacking to do here, but I just think there's so many neat little things that game does, whether it's the sound design or the pixel art or the way that drawers get jammed when you've got another cupboard open. And,
that polish is real nice. I love that stuff. Yeah,
and just some really innovative, like unique to video games, arguably storytelling about like this girl and her relationships telling the story through objects and rooms is just like not something I expected at the start of this year to be like, I really like a game that told a story through objects and rooms and unpacking objects. Like, I think that whole thing, I think it does incredibly well. And I definitely did the game in like 3 or 4 sittings. And I think that does help the game because it's definitely not like, I would have struggled to do it in 2 sittings or 3 sittings.
Yeah, it as I said, like, it just feels a bit too much like, okay, taking stuff, and then get rid of the box. And I almost wish there was an easier way to just like get rid of the boxes straight away. But then it feels like it might have been a mess on the floor of all the stuff. And yeah, it's a hard problem to solve, I think. But I like the game a lot. I think it's not as high up for me personally, but I respect how much you like it, and I think that, especially when you were talking about like the number of times that you have moved in the last however long, and like how that kind of like is it like personally related to you, I definitely feel that, so that makes sense. I would love to get the Great Ace Attorney 2 higher. I understand you haven't played it, and so like you haven't heard the greatest music track in a game this year, which is in the Great Ace Attorney 2, and my god, it's so fucking perfect. But
I could nominate something else. I could suggest at 8 if you'd rather that was at 8 instead of the Great Ace Attorney 2.
Okay, yeah. What would you suggest to go down at 8?
I would suggest Axiom Verge 2.
Ooh, yeah. Oh man, I really like Axiom Verge 2, like in a way that I didn't expect I would. I think the thing with that game that gets me so much is that it is such a pure exploration experience, and I love that about Metroidvanias. Just like if it's done well, right? I think there are certain exploration Metroidvanias where like it is necessary to go through these particular paths and they block you off. Like even Super Metroid does this to a certain extent, and you know there are other games that like Hollow Knight as well, and I love that, but I think there's a pressure almost with those games in terms of their exploration because you have to fight enemies along the way, and because Axiom Verge 2 is like very easy and breezy in terms of you fight enemies, but like there's no penalty for death really, and it's not really a focus. There's a real chill vibe to the exploration of that space, and the music is also so stunningly good, like the like Indian kind of overtones with the synthetic stuff that just melds together in this really unique way. Another great soundtrack from this year. Really loved Axiom Verge 2. I think also because you liked it, I think that should probably be higher than Great Ace Attorney.
I do like it a lot. I mean, I prefer Dodgeball Academia to Axiom Verge 2.
Okay, wow.
And
okay.
So we're kind of messing around with these 4 games.
Yeah, it's tricky.
And I think the top 4 are kind of above these other 4 for sure.
So here's the thing. I like Axiom Verge 2 more than Death's Door, and I would take that over Death's Door. I would also take Dodgeball Academia over Death's Door. So can we have a Death's Door conversation maybe?
I think we can get onto this conversation, but I think we do need to stick a game at 8 first. Probably.
We do. Okay, so I'm just going to say let's put the Great Ace Attorney 2 at number 8.
That makes things a little simpler.
I think that's fair because I'm the one who's played it, and it is fantastic. It is one of the best Ace Attorney games. But at the end of the day, it is still an Ace Attorney game, right? So you kind of know what you're getting, and it has great twists and reveals, excellent writing, really good localization they did on it, especially with some of the tricky subject matter, right? Because a lot of the fan translation I read through and played was not as good at handling the sensitivities of British people being racist to Japanese people, which is obviously is a true to the era, and that's kind of what they're writing, but like it was maybe a bit clunkily handled, and I think it's a hard thing to handle, but I think that the localization did a good job at it. And yeah, again, I don't want to say the name of the music track that is my favorite because it's kind of a spoiler for the first game to the second game, but holy shit, like it's probably the best distillation of like the themes of a character and the journey they go on distilled into music, like because there is I'm not going to go into it because even just trying to tiptoe around it will maybe spoil it for some people. But holy shit, it's so good, and I've listened to it so many times. But yes, let's put the Great Ace Attorney 2 at number 8.
Based on what you're saying about Axiom Verge 2, and you're right, I do like that game a lot. We could go Dodgeball Academia next at number 7. We both really like Dodgeball Academia, but I do think these other games, Dodgeball Academia and Axiom Verge 2 are pretty level pegging for me.
Okay.
But I know that you like Axiom Verge 2. quite a bit more than that from what you've already said. And
Yeah.
Dodgeball Academia is just such a great game. It maybe doesn't deserve to be even higher than where it's
maybe
at
not.
7.
Maybe not. It's the TNL pick of the year, which I think to make it to
Yeah.
number 7 is really admirable for
Yeah.
that. I think, yeah, I do think Dodgeball Academia loses a bit of steam close to the end. Part of that is that I wish they had a few more unique areas. A lot of the middle of the game feels like you're just going around the same school areas that you've been to before. There's the forest you go to early on, and then there's the high kind of mountain area you go to at the end. And there is the underground like arena part that you do, but like a lot of the middle of that game is just going back around the school, and it does have some really fun parts. Like I think of the part where you have to look after the dodgeball that's a baby, like pretending you're, the thing that people do at school is like, here's a flour bag and you take it around school for a week to pretend it's a baby.
You never did that. It's a very American thing.
It's a very, that's what I'm saying. It's very much drawing on American school culture, which I think this game is very much doing, even though it's made in Brazil. Feels like it's drawing on the American high school experience,
but with a big Japanese anime injection.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I think that section is just so funny, the way that your main character just calls it a different name every time, and like it's just really well written and hilarious.
It's good writing, yeah. It's
so
mechanically strong, and from an RPG perspective, like there's a good solid amount of progression that feels balanced and fair, which is sometimes hard.
And the different characters as well with their different abilities and like switching them out. Like, and I felt by the last battle, I really did have to strategize and make sure that I had the right people in, like having Balloony for healing and like switching between people and using their special abilities correctly. Like it was a challenge. I died a couple of times on that final boss before I finally beat it. And I think that it actually, the thing that makes it work is that the combat, the dodgeball gameplay is really good, right? And I don't think the game would have held together if it didn't have that fun, engaging, like, level to it, because you do so much of it, because you're going around the school like Pokemon style. People will see you and be like, it's time to battle, and then it goes into the battle sequence. And if I didn't enjoy that side of it, I think the game would fall flat. But because it is so satisfying, I really enjoyed going through it. But I think, as we've kind of mentioned, there are bits in the middle where it's a little flabby, and would have been nice to have at least one more area. I think would have elevated it even more so, and made it like feel like it had a bit more variety to it. But understandably, it's a small team, right? Brazilian team, and shout out to Brazil this year, by the way, which 2 games in our top 10, Unsighted and Dodgeball Academia, both Brazilian games, both fantastic. So yeah, I can see it at number 7. Totally appreciate that.
Let me run through 10 till 7. So we've got number 10, New Pokemon Snap. Number 9, Toem. Number 8, The Great Ace Attorney 2. Number 7, Dodgeball Academia. And then the top 6 in no particular order: Eastward, Metroid Dread, Death's Door, Unsighted, Axiom Verge 2, and Unpacking.
Yeah. I personally would take Unpacking next, I think, at number 6. I know you want it higher. So I want to know how you feel about Death's Door, because I know you like it a great deal, and I also like Death's Door a lot. Like, I think Death's Door is a really satisfying, solid game from a combat perspective. Some of those boss fights are excellent. Some of the best boss fights of the year, I would say. Like, Metroid Dread and Death's Door probably have my favorite boss fights of the year, I would say, overall.
Right.
Like, I think of the big crow at the end, and like there's some maybe like the last boss I wasn't as hot on, but I think there's some really cool spectacle bosses that are fun to figure out. Like Grandma in the Pot is awesome. Like, it's not that difficult. But Grandma in the Pot, what a great boss fight. And the big frog, like those set piece bosses, I think are probably the strongest part of the game for me, because it doubles down on what the game is good at.
There's a reason they're on the cover, for sure.
Yes. And it also like harks back to like what they were good at in Titan Souls, which was, doing these individualized boss fights. And I think that's the thing that they nailed. I felt, for me personally, the world never drew me in enough to want me to get to explore it as much. And I felt like the areas were not sparse necessarily, but like a lot of it had a very, very strict formula of like new area, do combat stuff to get to the dungeon, do the dungeon area, do the boss, and then go to the next one. And it never went beyond that, for me personally, and I think it's like so solid mechanically and really fun. But I wasn't as into the world as you were. I didn't really get into the story as much, so I think that probably has an effect in terms of your enjoyment higher than mine.
I think the level of polish between music, art design, the way the game feels, I think is really there. It's
really high.
You're right. The world really did draw me in a lot more than for you. And I thought like doors and these doors between worlds and the living and the dead, and that like was a really good excuse for having doors that just kind of warp you between worlds, which so many games have. But sometimes it's like, oh yeah, there's a warp point, and they don't really justify. I think this game actually justifies a warp point or a warp door in a more clever way, which
interesting,
I like
way of healing as well that I don't know how I felt about really, because there were ways in which it, every time you...
The soulsy healing, you mean?
Well, every time you respawn, you don't need to heal, and so sometimes they'd put a pot by the door where you'd respawn at, and so why would you plant one there when you're just walking out the door after you've died and you have full health again, right? Like, I think the tactical... Like, they almost try to make it a tactical thing of where you plant those flowers for healing, but I never felt like I had to be tactical about it because I had so many seeds the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yes, but having a number of seeds did make the deaths feel more finite, and like I like the way it exerts a bit of pressure on you, but not so much pressure. It's like you can't, you never want to throw away deaths in this game like I might in some other similar game, right. And I liked that about this game, but it wasn't like a timed mechanic. I'm not dunking on Unsighted here, but it's not like a timed mechanic or some other mechanic to put pressure on you not dying. And I did also like the combat where you melee in order to charge up your ranged attack. I think that's a neat little mechanic.
For sure, definitely. And it gives you a bit of element of risk reward there that I think is valuable, especially in a game where you can't heal mid-fight because you have limited... You've got like 4 or 5 by the end, probably. Usually 5, I would say. I found, I think, 4 of the heart piece things, so I did have 5 health by the end, and that helped, certainly. But I think because it forces you into doing a bit of that risk reward, it risks you, instead of turtling and just like getting tiny little hits in, like it almost forces you into the type of combat the game wants you to do, even though it is scary because there's no way to heal during a fight, right?
Yeah, I like the way it does force you to mix it up, so I didn't feel like, because normally I would just like, I'll just fully upgrade my bow and arrow and turtle like hell, and I did that to a degree, but the game forced me still to go in there and do melee combat, so I felt like I needed to upgrade that as well. Very simple upgrade system. I kind of appreciated that for what this game was doing. The fact that it is only like 3 worlds, 3 bosses, and then like a final area boss made me more keen to kind of explore and look for the upgrades. And by the end of the game, I did have like extra health and extra range attacks and stuff like that. And it's just a very lean, concise, elegantly constructed game that I was
very fluid as well. Just very fluid.
For me, it has to be above Unpacking and Axiom Verge 2, but we can discuss it in relation to Unsighted personally.
Okay. I think Axiom Verge 2, I like a whole deal. I think you maybe like Death's Door more than I like Axiom Verge 2. There were elements of Axiom Verge 2 that frustrated me, just in the sense of, okay, I don't really know where I'm supposed to go next, and the game does a bad job of signaling that to you. I did have to look stuff up for Axiom Verge 2 a few times, it's a dead end here and a dead end here and a dead end here. Where do I actually have to go? Which I totally appreciate, and I think like a lot of that in my memory has fallen away just because the rest of it I enjoyed so much. I just enjoyed the going around, and I didn't mind getting lost, I guess. Like that was a thing of like I would explore for 2 hours and be like, oh, I guess I don't know where I'm going, but I wouldn't necessarily be that mad about it, if you know what I mean. Like, I think in other games, if that happened to me and I'm like wandering around for 2 hours and making no progress, I would be mad about it. But for some reason in Axiom Verge 2, I never was, and I think that's just testament to the freedom that it gives you. And also I just liked the vibe of the world and the music enough that I was okay just kind of wandering and not really going anywhere. But I do appreciate that, that it wasn't the best way it could have been handled, and I think like a way in which to, because sometimes he would put stuff on the map that's like in a blank area, and you're like, okay, I need to get to there, but you would have to go to like the opposite side of the map to go into the other world with the drone to get through to another place that you would pop out of, that then you would be able to get there, but it would be like in the opposite direction to where the game is telling you to go, so yeah, I think that there are issues there. So I think the Death Door can be above Axiom Verge 2. I'm just kind of questioning, where does Unpacking go in relation to this?
I mean, I feel, the fact that you're up for Death's Door higher means I'm more willing to stick Unpacking at 6 if you then put Axiom Verge at 5. You know,
I would appreciate that. Yes,
okay.
I would definitely appreciate
that.
From
there. Yeah,
because I like Unpacking a great deal, and I think you're right in terms of like narrative in games. This is the thing that, you know, we always bang on about, right? Is like, can you match mechanics with narrative? And like, damn, does Unpacking do a good job at that? It really, really does.
Sounds like Unpacking and Before Your Eyes are like the two games of the year for here's a new way of storytelling and unique to video games kind of thing.
Absolutely,
you know? Like,
absolutely.
And I think that always does deserve to be rewarded. And I look forward to 2022. There's going to be some new indie game that's going to have some new way of conveying a story through a video game that I think is just such an exciting part of the medium.
100%, yeah, and I really respect Unpacking for what it does with that, and it's affecting, and I think it's just really well polished and does a great job. But yeah, just for me personally, the actual playing of the game was enjoyable, but it is just unpacking boxes, right? Like at the end of the day, it is just like putting stuff in place, and obviously there's like decision making there, and you choose, like, it's what people love about Animal Crossing, right? Is like decorating your space and choosing where things go and how things go, and it's effective. But yeah, I think it works at number 6.
Right.
And yeah, Axiom Verge at 5.
5. So
question is, Bally, I would move to have Unsighted above Death's Door on this list.
I would just say that the top 4 is Eastward, Metroid Dread, Death's Door, and Unsighted in no particular order at the moment.
A few reasons for why Unsighted I think should be above Death's Door. I think that it is, from a combat perspective, a little more nuanced. Death's Door's cool, but it's basically dodge, roll, and hit, so it's a bit more simple. Doesn't have stamina management, and not to say that's a good thing, but I think Unsighted uses it in a good way, in a way that allows restraint in terms of the amount you're attacking bosses and enemies, and just the strategy that it brings into it. Like, having the stamina management allows you to, you know, look at boss patterns a bit more thoroughly and make sure that you're being careful, while also having the crutch of the heal if you need it. But really, it's the parry. Really, it's that puts it above in terms of combat for me. And then when it comes to level design, like, I just think Unsighted is just much more my jam, right? Like, Death's Door has some cool spaces you go through, but it's always very obvious and very clear, and I don't think the actual mainline puzzles to get through those dungeon areas are ever head scratchers. You're always like, okay, go through this door and hit this switch, and that's how I get through. I was never stuck in Death's Door, whereas Unsighted, I think, when it comes to that level of design in a space, always had parts that I was wondering, okay, how do I get through this? What am I supposed to do here? And again, it wasn't overly challenging, but it really scratched that itch that I have when it comes to this style of video game. And so for me, I think that it just ticks a lot more boxes that I personally am more invested in when it comes to an experience than Death's Door. And I don't know how you feel about one versus the other, because I know you like both of the games, and maybe equally. I'm not sure what your stance is.
I like them both. I've been thinking about this a long time, and I have obviously just played Unsighted, and I've been making my own personal list. And yeah, I think Death's Door is the more elegant experience. I think it's arguably
it's the more mainstream experience.
It's more mainstream. Right? It's more well designed. But I agree with you. Unsighted appeals more to my personal tastes, and it is the stronger dungeon design. I enjoyed the few head scratchers in those dungeons. I enjoy the parry. I enjoy the Hollow Knight style chip system, and I enjoyed like the syringes and the cogs, and it all came together in a great way. And we talked in the first segment how some of the NPC stuff could have been stronger, but that doesn't hold the game back. And I think Unsighted so, no. just went completely under the radar, and even that part of me wants to be like, we need to shout about Unsighted more, because it is just such a fantastic game. So it's close for me, but I'm happy for Death's Door to be 4 and Unsighted at 3. And it's really tight, and they're both great kind of games doing similar things, but in their own distinct way. And I'm glad they both exist. I think it's such a shame that Unsighted wasn't talked about more when it came out, and it's on Game Pass. Like, it's totally out there for everyone to enjoy. So yeah, I'm happy with that.
It's phenomenal. I think it's one of those weird experiences actually where I did start it and I kind of bounced off it early just because I was dying at the start a bunch, and I was like, okay, well, people like this, but I don't know. And then, it kind of blew up a bit on Twitter with the developers talking about like how, people weren't paying attention to it, and I was like, you know what, I should give this another go. And man, I'm so glad that I did, because I think it kind of takes pushing through to that first kind of dungeon in order to like really get the ball rolling with it, to like understand the combat, to know the timings of enemies, and just like understand what the game is asking of you. Because as you mentioned, it gives a lot to you up front, like with the chips and the cogs and all that stuff. It's a little overwhelming, and so I did appreciate like going back to it and thinking, okay, I should have stuck with this, because I mean, look, it's number 3 so far on our list, right? It's really really good.
It's really good.
And yeah, I think it deserves to be this high on this list. And it's only not higher because the top 2 games we have are just straight up fucking bangers in a way that is hard to touch.
Eastward and Metroid Dread is giving me feels of Will-o'-the-Wisps Hades last year.
I haven't talked to you about this, but I actually don't know where you sit on these 2 games in terms of what you would have as the number 1 game of the year.
This is really tight for me. Really tight.
I guess, yeah. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, I'll say something short. I think Metroid Dread is a fantastic Metroid game. It's the best 2D Metroid. But there are Metroidvanias I prefer to Metroid Dread. Not many.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love the design of it, and I love, the bosses, and I had an absolute blast just going through that game, like 9-12 hours or whatever. It was so good, so slick, really awesome. But Eastward is like kind of seminal and a tier above that in my mind. And what I mean is that like it is doing story beats and character, the way it tells the stories of its characters in a genuine Earthbound way. And when you throw in like the incredible soundtrack, the unbelievably good pixel art, and some actual decent Zelda dungeons. I agree the mechanics of like the combat in particular could have been stronger, but the actual
I still think it's really smooth though. Like I really like the satisfying, slapping that those slimes at the start with the pan. I was like, oh, this does feel good.
Yeah, yeah, and there's just some really good dungeon design, especially like the final dungeon in the game is like I think really well designed. And I a bit like the way where we reminisce about our Earthbound discussion when we did our backlog club. I really reminisce about our spoiler cast we did about Eastward, and I really think about like there are a few things in that game you spotted above me that I thought, wow, Emizo was right, that's really impactful, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think for me Eastward is above Metroid Dread, and it's because it is doing things that are far more rare in the video game space, probably. Not to say if there were loads of games like Eastward in the same way that there's a lot of Metroidvanias out there, maybe it'd be the other way around. But there's something about the fact that that itch isn't scratched enough that Eastward is delivering on in a massive way, where I do think the story delivers, the character beats deliver, and I just loved the locations, the cooking, it was just I digested this game a lot more slowly than UMBZ. It took me a good long time to beat. But that's not to say I still just had an incredible time with this game. It was just such a great story, well told, and all the sort of promise of the trailers and the hype building up to it that we were personally excited about, it really delivered on that. And again, it was a shame that more people in the industry didn't talk about this game, but Eastward, I think, would be my number 1 on this list for sure.
It's a very good argument. This has been a very difficult one for me personally because, as you know, I adored Eastward. I just thought it was a stunning experience that really knocked me off my feet. We were talking about our Switch stats thing that we got through, and I think my most played day, because it tells you what day you played the most number of hours on Switch, was I think the second day after Eastward had come out, which I know is that's the one Saturday that I sat there all day and did nothing else but play Eastward. Even though it didn't tell me what game it was, I knew. And that I think is so special. Like it just left a remarkable mark on me in terms of just how much it sucked me into its world, but the soundtrack is incredible and the art is just amazing, and then you have Metroid Dread, which I've been waiting for 20 fucking years of my life, and And like it's perfect. It's the best Metroid game. Like I might like Fusion more because I'm nostalgic and that's just the way I'm gonna be. But like it nails every aspect from like the main campaign, going through these spaces, like calling back to other games in the series, like pulling from all the best elements of every game in the 2D Metroid saga, having a story that you care about and like actually has payoff and like stakes and like interesting lore implications and a fucking incredible ending. It has the post-game stuff that made me fall in love with Fusion, which is shine sparking and puzzles built around shine sparking, with some really satisfying and clever ones of those that were a blast to figure out. And like I haven't had that experience in 2 decades of having a new 2D Metroid where I'm just sitting there trying to figure out a shine spark puzzle. It's like one of my favorite things in games is trying to figure out a shine spark puzzle, and to have new ones of those that are this well designed and this clever, it was just amazing, man. It was just so much fun. And then I fucking filled out 100% of the entire map, even though I didn't need to, just because I was enjoying it so much. It's the culmination of everything I've wanted in a Metroid game. And like you were talking about how you have other Metroidvanias that you like more. And I have to re-examine that, honestly, because I think this is like very up there for me. Like it is alongside the Ori games right now. There is something about the movement in Metroid that I don't think is unmatched, because I think Ori has like its own unique movement that I think is perfect. But Metroid has a flow to it and a feel, and especially the feel of this game is so fucking tight. It's just, oh my god, I can just lick it like butter. It's just so absolutely, like, I don't think there's been a smoother Nintendo experience since Link Between Worlds, right? Like that game, so smooth. And I think Metroid Dread tops it in terms of smoothness. It's just like, oh, gorgeous stuff. So I love both these games a lot, and I
was gonna say, we were in a bit of a deadlock last year, and I pushed really hard for like Will of the Wisps last year, and we did agree that was 1 above 2 for Hades, even though I know Hades was your personal number 1. So I will like say, if you really want Dread above Eastward, I'm prepared to go for that based on the fact that Hades was number 2 last year. You know, like we can do that if you really want, but equally happy for Eastward to be 1, Dread 2.
It's always this balance, I think, every year of what is the game that I think came out of nowhere and hit me versus the game that is really nice and comfortable and familiar that hit me. And like sometimes I go with, like 2019 is a good example of or maybe it was 2018. Yeah, 2018. No, 2018 was Celeste. My bad. 2019, I believe, was Bloodstained and Slay the Spire. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I went with the comfortable, familiar thing of Bloodstained. Even though, like, thinking back on it, I think Slay the Spire is a better game, probably. And Slay the Spire probably should have been my game of the year.
I think Slay the Spire is the better game.
Yeah. But well, of course, you have no debate there, of course. But, like, and then sometimes, like, last year, I think maybe personally, Ori is a game that I am more comfortable and like more, but I gave it to Hades because it came out of nowhere and smacked me in the face. And like this year's the same thing of like I'm leaning a bit more towards Metroid just because of the history I have with it and just how personal it is to me. But Eastward just fucking knocked me off my feet, and like even if I do have Metroid as my number 1, and I still haven't decided 100% yet whether it will be versus Eastward, they are my top 2. Like in my actual personal game of the year, I'll say that now. They are absolutely.
I'll just say for my list, they're not my top 2.
Okay, interesting.
No spoilers.
But yes, Eastward and Metroid Dread are my top 2. And it may well be that Metroid Dread is my number 1, just because I just have so much personal history and nostalgia tied to it, and that's almost an unbreakable thing, right? It's impossible to like argue against it. That said, I think that Eastward and what it achieves, and like as a TNL choice, you know, like, and we like sometimes to make these choices of what best represents the show versus other people in the industry, and I guarantee you no one else is going to give Eastward their game of the year. So I think in true TNL fashion, it's so deserving. It is such a remarkable, awesome game that I truly loved. I think I'm with you. I think we should make Eastward number 1 and game of the year.
I think we'll also probably get a more meaningful sequel to Dread before we get something that could capture the kind of splendor of Eastward again, you know? Like, I think it's a more rare occurrence. As much as we have been waiting 2 decades for an original Metroid game, I actually think Eastward is kind of more unique in that way.
Yeah, it's just filled with such life, right? Like, I think Sam is like one of my favorite characters in a video game in a long time. She's just like this bright spark and just such an absolute delight. Like, the writing is so on point, and I've heard some people saying that like it's overly verbose, but I actually really liked that because you're sitting in the world more and you're hearing more from these characters, and just the parallel stories that it tells with these like pairs of people, and the weird like unexplained stuff that frankly I love. Like, I love the obscurity and the kind of like the way in which the game leaves things unsaid. You know, I love reading into stuff like that. But it also has like those quirky, bizarre moments, right? Like, the Hollywood Monkey Train section is amazing. It's so good, and it's this lovely like break from the kind of the tone, that kind of dour tone that happens previous to that. There's so many like sections, and I think Eastwood is far from perfect. You know, I definitely think that you can tighten up some of the combat stuff. I think that there are ways in which the pacing could have been a lot better, but I think for the story they wanted to tell and the world that they created, I just fell in love with it, and I think it's just a remarkable thing that is just so deserving of so much more love than it is getting. So yeah, I'm here for it. Eastwood at number 1, Metroid Dread at number 2. But I mean, Metroid Dread, come on, guys. I mean, how
Dread.
Like, it's like my video game. Like, if you could distill a perfect game that I want to play into a video game, it's Metroid Dread with a bullet. Like, as expected, I did nothing but play Metroid Dread that weekend, and dumped 20 hours into it, no sweat. Like, finished it, 100%ed it, started a hard mode, like, and I'm going to play through it again. I'll probably play through it again over Christmas, you know? I'm saying I'm playing through a lot of different things over Christmas, of course, but yeah, I've got some time off, you know? Got some time to fill. But as soon as I picked up the controls and I felt Samus moving around, I was like, all right, it's a perfect game. Everyone go home.
It's the way that I think, in the way it feels, it is actually leagues above even Samus Returns from 2017.
Yes,
like it's even leagues above the most recent one, you know. And I think they've really just nailed the animation in relation to the way the game feels and the way Samus runs, and that just makes everything else in the game feel even better. Like, that helped you want to 100% every corner of the game, you know. Like, it's that feel. And it makes you feel more in control when you're fighting these unbelievably tough bosses, you know, like it helps everything. And it even helps you when you're running to save your ass from these Emmys, which I actually think are a really cool element of the game that I enjoyed a lot. And yeah, it's incredible.
It's so good, man. I'm thrilled. I can't fucking believe it. We got it. We actually got announced this year and came out this year. Like, when they announced that at E3, obviously you can go watch my reaction on my YouTube channel. I lost my fucking mind.
When the name dropped, your eyes just roll back into your head.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. It was fantastic. And then just to see that it had an October release, and I just like had 3 months away from this brand new 2D Metroid that I've been waiting for so long. Oh, it's amazing. But yeah, I totally agree with Eastwood as number 1. It's play it. If you're listening to this podcast and you have a Switch and you've been like, oh, that seems cool, I don't know, not many people are talking about it. This is the TNL stamp of approval. It's our game of the year. Play Eastwood, please, please, I beg of you. It's so good, and
so good.
Yeah, I think that probably covers us for the top 10 games of the year on Nintendo Switch. Bally, would you do me the honors of going through from 10 to 1?
Here we go. Number 10, New Pokemon Snap. Number 9, Toem. Number 8, The Great Ace Attorney 2. Number 7, Dodgeball Academia. Number 6, Unpacking. Number 5, Axiom Verge 2. Number 4, Death's Door. Number 3, Unsighted. Number 2, Metroid Dread. And number 1, Eastward.
Definitely not what I expected coming into this, I think. Like, certain things higher and certain things
like
lower.
Like what?
And I think Death's Door I expected to try and push a bit further down the list and be a dick about it. But you know what? Talking about it with you and remembering, like, those boss fights are fucking excellent. Like, they really are. And I had a great time playing Death's Door. Like, obviously I wanted Unsighted above it, and we got that, and that's perfectly good. And that's kind of really all I wanted. So
well done making me play Unsighted before this discussion, because I said...
Absolutely.
And we said I can play Toem or Unsighted in the remaining time, and you were like, definitely play Unsighted. So I got to it, and yeah, I'm glad I did.
And I still got Toem on the list anyway.
Still got Toem on the list. Yeah. So But yeah, don't miss Unsighted. It is fantastic.
Stellar. Yeah, I can strongly vouch for everything in this top 10. Maybe apart from New Pokemon Snap, which you can vouch for, but yeah. Anyway, love it. Love to see it. Great list. Really fun. I always love doing this list every year, and I think it's always representative of like how our taste in terms of like smaller indie games always get a big spotlight here, and I think that's no different this time around. Nintendo didn't have like the strongest of years necessarily,
no.
But that said, they had a couple of great games, and still a lot of the indie stuff for me trumps a lot of their stuff.
We've not even mentioned their big sellers in like Mario Party and
of
Pokemon,
course, yeah.
BDSM.
Yes, BDSM, everyone's favorite Pokemon game. A great game. Speaking of which. We, of course, ran a community game of the year, which was I put out a Google form and was like, hey, here are slots 5 through 1. Give me your top 5 Switch games of the year and write them in, and we'll add them all up and go through them. So, Bally, I have a top 5 from our community.
Here we go.
We got a bunch of votes on it, and some interesting choices all around. There were definitely certain games that only got 1 vote, or only one person put them on their list. Shout out to whoever put Ease 9 on their list. I'm going to guess that's Capsule J, because I don't know anyone else who plays the Ease game this year. And someone put Pokemon Unite on there, so someone likes that game out there. However, let's get to our actual top 5 list, which number 4 and 5 were actually tied for the same number of points. So just to walk you through how I did this system, I gave points based on where you put it on your list. So if you put it at number 1, you'd get 5 points. If you put it at number 2, you'd get 4 points, etc., down to 5, where you'd get 1 point if you put it at number 5. And not everyone submitted a full top 5. Some people submitted 4 games. Some people submitted 3 games. It was a variance because obviously not everyone has played everything, and that's totally cool. However, here is the list. So at number 5 is The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, making it at the end of the list, which is very cool to see. Glad that a lot of people picked that up and people were checking it out. And I think it got more points because a lot of the people who picked it put it quite high up their list. So if you play The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, you either had it at number 1 or number 2. So a lot of people were very into it. At number 4, with the same amount of points, is Eastward. So there we had an impact on our community balance. So Eastward made it into the top 5, which is great to see. And the reason it was above Great Ace Attorney is because more people voted for Eastward. So more people had played it. So I just wanted to represent it slightly higher, even though they got the same number of points total. So Eastward at number 4. And number 3, Bal, you'll be happy to see that New Pokemon Snap made it to number 3
Sweet.
on our list.
Wow.
Obviously, a lot of people would have been picking this up on Switch and checking it out. So it's cool to see that people did like it, and it got a good response. At number 2, it's a game that we probably should have played but didn't. It's Monster Hunter Rise, which I know there's a bunch of Monster Hunter fans in our community. Definitely lots of people who played that and loved it and had it high on their list. So Monster Hunter Rise at number 2. Definitely, there's that expansion that's coming out in 2022. It's one that I would like to jump on at some point. Like, it feels like the window is gone for it, but there has to be a Monster Hunter that we jump on at some point, Bally. There has to be. We've got to do it. So yeah, Rise seems like a good proposition. And then in first place by like a country mile, like so like adding up these points, we're in like the 20s or so of like the points. Metroid Dread with 62 points. I believe 7 or 8 people had it as their number 1, which instantly gave it double the points of any other game. But Metroid Dread easily number 1 by a country mile. Absolutely stole the show there. So yeah, Metroid Dread, the game of the year from the community. So yeah, Great Ace Attorney, Eastward, New Pokemon Snap, Monster Hunter Rise, and Metroid Dread. So that's great, a good list, I think, and definitely shows that Nintendo still had some great stuff this year that people really enjoyed.
Everyone needs to get on Unsighted and Death's Door. Those the top 2 games not mentioned.
Which, to be fair, Death's Door came out very recently on Switch, so it only just made the cutoff for us for this list. Unsighted has been on there for a while, but yeah, definitely those are great, and people should check them out and play them because they're good video games. All right, I think that is pretty much it. That wraps us up, Bally, for the game of the year and for all this stuff. How are you feeling about 2021 as a video gaming year overall?
Strong. I like that there's not like a Last of Us Part 2.
There's no consensus game.
There's not like this big consensus AAA single player pick that's just winning everything. So I think that this year, more so than any other year, perhaps since like 2019, because I think that was another year where there was a lot of different picks between outlets, which is nice to see. And yeah, I think there's just a really strong list of indies, to be honest, and I've never felt, maybe this is the most passionate I've been about a handful of indies that I feel haven't quite got enough limelight, especially games like Unsighted, Eastward that we've talked about. But even, I guess Unpacking did make pretty big waves, but maybe Dodgeball Academia is another good example. Like,
for sure,
just not really cutting through in the podcasting circles that I listen to, which I think is a shame, because a lot of those games, and my knowledge of a lot of those podcasters is, they would love these games. They're just not like they're not seeing the light of day, which is a shame.
Not enough time, man. It's not enough time to play.
Not enough time, and they are all too busy playing the likes of, Far Cry 6, which is tragic.
Oh yes, let's dump 50 hours into that. That's a good use of our
exactly.
time. Yeah,
but as an industry, I guess the Bobby Kotick stuff is kind of dominating a lot of negative headlines at the moment, unfortunately. For sure. But I do think the video game industry is still improving, and we mentioned it before, but I think Unpacking Before Your Eyes are just two fantastic examples of like new ways of storytelling in video games, and that's kind of something I'm very excited about, even if this year was maybe weaker from Nintendo. Like Dread was obviously fantastic, but other than that, it's like Pokemon, Mario Party, Mario Golf, I guess WarioWare was really cool to see, new Pokemon Snap was cool to see, but maybe a quieter year from Nintendo. And you feel like Breath of the Wild 2 is probably not going to make next year. And
it's bubbling, son.
Yeah, I hope they've got some other game we're not aware of yet that's probably
Odyssey 2, come on, where is it?
Odyssey 2 would be a fantastic shout for like just kind of holiday next year that I think could really... But that would really make my day to see that from Nintendo. And otherwise, 100%. I think the new gen consoles are going from strength to strength with Horizon Forbidden West coming out. We've got... Elden Ring and all these games coming next year, so I think it's a big year. It's a big year for games next year, and this year's been just as big.
Even the lineup we have at the moment for 22 for Nintendo is like Splatoon. Hopefully Splatoon comes out. Hopefully Mario plus Rabbids makes it, and maybe Bayonetta 3 even makes it out, because we've actually seen that game now. We've seen gameplay, like it's a real video game, and that would be great. And if Breath of the Wild 2 makes it, I mean, we've already decided 2022's Game of the Year, so we're all good. Don't have to worry about it. Just seal it, baby. Seal that envelope. So yeah, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. Sweet. Let's plug ourselves and get on out of here. Of course, we're going to be doing on our next episode our predictions for 2022. So if you would like to send in your predictions, you can send them to our email address, which Bally will tell you right now.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Yes, we want your predictions. But if you have a question, that's also welcome. We will talk about those the show after that. So we're always welcoming more questions. Yeah,
regular emails always good. Want to fill up that bag, get it nice and filled like Santa's sack on Christmas.
Don't forget our Christmas present of an iTunes review.
Yes, yes, of course.
Our number one Christmas present.
If you want to give us a Christmas present, go to iTunes, review us. That'd be very nice. Or Apple Podcasts, where the hell they call it.
Where am I? I'm living in like 2014.
Bally, we still use Skype, for God's sake, all right? Like, we can't talk shit on anything. So you can obviously go and find us over there. You can also find us on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can support the show and get some bonus podcasts like our non-Nintendo Game of the Year, which we did recently. That was a podcast episode that happened, and you can listen to it for $1 a month if you go over to Patreon and support us. We would like Bally to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my wife Caroline. Thank you all for your support. And yeah, as MBZ said, we had a very good joint top 10 non-Nintendo games of the year. I think we played like 21 non-Nintendo games. That was a good long in-depth discussion over there.
Yeah, so check that out if you are so inclined. Obviously,
we should shout out our personal top 10s as well.
Oh yes, yeah, of course. So that will happen probably between Christmas and New Year. Depends on like when I make mine, when Bally makes his. Usually every year we make a video, top 10 video, where we do cross-platform everything, our top 10 games overall from that came out in 2021. And I'll put mine on my YouTube channel. Bally will put it on the TNL YouTube channel, and we'll obviously upload those as audio versions to the podcast feed as well. So you can just listen to them if you don't want to go watching a video. Stuff like
and that's cross-platform personal top 10s.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll pop those up as soon as they're done. So I need to go write mine because I haven't even started writing it. So need to get up onto that. But I've got time off, so it's all good. So check those out. But also, thanks for listening. And you can find us in various places on the internet, such as Twitter. It's a website. Some people use it, probably shouldn't, but I still do. And you can find me there at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally, making questionable choices, still using Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. I posted a video of me driving very fast in a car in Forza Horizon 5. And
that's that video game, driving
fun.
fast in a car. It's pretty good.
It's a good game.
Yeah. You can find the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast. Obviously, we posted the poll there for our Game of the Year community vote and stuff like that. So we put polls sometimes, do shouting out what the episode is going to be, what's going to be on it, and stuff like that. So go follow us over there, and you can get updates whenever new episodes drop and things like that. Obviously, you can find the show in various places: Spotify, Stitcher. A shout out actually to Spotify because we got our Spotify Wrapped. I can't even remember if I said that last time, but maybe that happened in between episodes. But our Spotify Wrapped came in, which was nice, and we grew quite a bit from Spotify. So thank you everyone for listening on Spotify. It's cool as a podcaster. You get that little breakdown of like how much you've grown and where different countries people are listening to you in. I think we were like 42 countries or something, which is pretty fantastic. Yeah. So thanks everybody for being multicultural and diverse across the world, listening to our goofy Nintendo podcast for two lads in the UK. It's a weird thing, but it's fun and we enjoy it. So you can find us all over the place. Subscribe there, and obviously our YouTube channel and stuff like that. You can find all the links in the description of the show. Follow us in various places. That's going to be it. That's us done for 2021, Bal. It's the end of the year. Oh, we made it through yet another year, another set of video games.
Spend all that time playing all those video games and then make those lists, and then the new year comes around and you've got to start from scratch again.
You do have to start from scratch
play
again,
all those games again.
Yes, I think I'm hitting my record of the most games I've played in a year. Currently at 74. Can I make it to 80 before December ends?
Play Toree 3D2 and you can just
tick one off the list, man. Just absolutely tick it off. Easy stuff. We'll see how that goes. But I might cut back next year because I played a lot of video games. So there's a problem. Need to read more books. That's why I need to.
There you go.
All right, well, thanks everybody for listening. We will be back in the new year with some more chat about video games and Nintendo and the industry and all those fun things. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Furi Furi Nori Nori from Taiko no Tatsujin Drum and Fun, copyright Bandai Namco 2018.